issue with
The feedback
feedback
result. Hello.
Hello.
Still getting
Still
the
getting good
feedback.
feedback.
Is there someone
There's
else
someone
who's
else
got?
who's got.
I mean,
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Is yours
Is
on?
yours on?
Mine's on.
Hello.
Hello. Good now?
Hello. Okay. I think we're good. I'm going to call the meeting to order again. I'm calling this meeting to order. This is a Redmond City Council study session held on Tuesday, August 13th, 2024, commencing at 7 p.m. Council members in attendance are Councilmember Salahuddin, Councilmember Nueva Camina, Councilmember Stewart, Councilmember Anderson, and myself, Council President Kritzer. And we have Councilmember Fields online. I believe Council Vice President Forsyth is absent tonight, but if she joins us, I will announce her. There are 4 items on the agenda tonight: proposed fee program for the extended use of right-of-way, Safer Streets Action Plan status update, and the Maintenance and Operations Center Master Plan update, as well as council talk time. The first item on the agenda is the proposed fee program for the extended use of right-of-way. Aaron Burt, Public Works Director, will introduce this item.
Good evening, council members. Aaron Burt, Public Works Director. Happy to be here this evening here in August. We presented this item or introduced it previously, but we want to go through a little bit more in-depth discussion on this proposed extended use right-of-way fee. Tonight I'm joined by my Deputy Director, Vangie Garcia, and also Patty Criddle of the Transportation Operations Safety Engineering Division. So what we're doing is the city, for time, since the beginning of time, has allowed extended closures of the public right-of-way for the benefit of private businesses without charging a use fee or excise tax, such as taking up a lane for vehicle travel or construction purposes, or even a portion of the sidewalk for outdoor dining. This is different than the permit requesting permission from the city to conduct these activities within the public right-of-way. So for example, in order to close the right-of-way, you have to come in for a right-of-way permit, but this is a different context where we're looking to impose a fee for that extended closure. The fee intends to, basically what we're looking to do is incentivize construction contractors to reduce the duration of right-of-way closures, and is based on the practices of neighboring cities to determine the recommended use fees. And with that, if we can.
internet lost, but just a second with my voice. I just got Windows 11, so I'm playing on Windows 11.
We'll turn it over to Vangie here 1 second to get the presentation up and running. So we'll go through this presentation. We did hand out issue matrix of questions that the council members had asked when we introduced this previously. Happy to take questions as we go along, or wait to the end, however you choose to do so.
Okay. Well, we'll just go with the flow. And of course, I am not Paul Cho today. So I am a pinch hitter, and Paul Cho is sick. So I'm here with Patty Criddle, who is the engineering supervisor for our right-of-way group in our traffic operations and safety engineering. And today, Public Works is discussing the proposed fee structure for the extended use in the public right-of-way. And we're going over the fee structure as it compares with neighboring cities and the steps involved for implementation. Over the past few years, the city has experienced an increased demand for long-term closures in the right-of-way that limit public access. It is found that the city has had to pay the state excise tax for the square footage of public right-of-way that is being used by private entities for outdoor dining. The Public Works Group, right-of-way group, with the help of a consultant, researched how neighboring cities were handling these issues and how best to apply those practices to Redmond. In developing this fee structure, activities utilizing the public right-of-way for extended periods of time included outdoor dining and construction activity. To clarify, the fee for extended use of the public right-of-way is to ensure there is no gift of public funds. The proposed fee for outdoor dining is an annual fee for $2 per square foot of closed right-of-way, which typically consists of closing right-of-way areas, sidewalk areas, or taking parking spaces in the street. The proposed fee for construction activity is a monthly fee of 75 cents per square foot of closed right-of-way, which typically consists of closing traffic lanes, bicycle lanes, landscape, and/or sidewalks.
We researched neighboring cities' practices for both outdoor dining and construction activity. For outdoor dining, the fee structure that Bellevue, Bothell, Kirkland, and Seattle use are based on land values per square foot. The permit fee includes the cost to intake, review, and evaluate the application, as well as inspect on site. The excise tax is 12.84% of the annual fee for total square footage of the right-of-way closure. The average space for outdoor dining in Redmond is 180 square feet. The table on this slide shows a comparison of how these outdoor dining fees would be calculated for 180 square feet of closed right-of-way. This slide shows the existing Redmond businesses offering outdoor dining and the sidewalk widths. During the pandemic, 6 businesses applied for an outdoor dining permit using the right-of-way. One of the 6 has reconfigured their outdoor dining space to be entirely on private property, thus no longer requiring a permit. During the permit review process, right-of-way staff verifies adequate sidewalk widths are provided for pedestrians and pedestrians on wheels. In urban centers and pedestrian priority zones outside urban centers, the minimum sidewalk width is 8 feet, but can be as wide as 17 feet on some streets. It is required to provide a minimum of a 4-foot wide pedestrian access route for sidewalks.
Oh, keep going.
Keep going.
Well, we analyzed the question of whether or not to have an annual fee or a seasonal fee, which would be a shorter few months. We analyzed that the fee would take as much as the same resources or more to have a shorter time period of multiple 6 months to where an annual, where you would have to just inspect the permits. So at this time, we would have the conversation at the end of how we would feel about it, because we have the amount of time with the same amount of staff. Moving forward, what we are recommending at this time is to keep the annual fee.
Okay, for construction activity, rates were compared with Bellevue and Seattle. Bellevue uses a simple calculation based on land value of adjacent property. Seattle uses a more complex formula that escalates the fees the longer the right-of-way is closed. The proposed fee follows Bellevue's model using Redmond's land values. The table shows a closure of approximately 4,800 square feet of sidewalk, bike lane, and vehicle lane. This is based on an actual closure of the Sunrise Hue project, which was located on Northeast 85th Street and 164th Avenue Northeast. The extended right-of-way use fee for construction activity will be assessed when the applicant submits for approval of their traffic control plan. I'll let you digest that for a second there. There has been a project website for this fee since June 17th. Since July 1st, the Let's Connect Redmond page was created with FAQs and a questionnaire. The links to these items have been shared with businesses through email, newsletters, direct emails, and social media. Public Works staff have been directly responding to inquiries and updating the sites. As of this morning, we had 95 responses to the questionnaire on Let's Connect Redmond. Results from the questionnaire include the following comments: support for the fee on construction activity and some statements that the fee is too low. There's also, it was mentioned that there's a concern for small businesses regarding the outdoor dining fee.
So next steps is that the questionnaire on the Let's Connect Redmond closes this Monday. Depending on feedback from the council, the proposed fee can be approved on September 3rd at the business meeting. Once approved by council, the right-of-way group will be working with internal and external customers to communicate the changes that will take place on January 2025. So our recommendations are that we approve the proposed use fees for extended use of the right-of-way. There is a fee resolution that would go to September 3rd business meeting and implementation in January 2025. And we're opening to questions.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Nova Camina.
Hi, thank you. I had a couple of questions on, back on page 3, we can see those kind of buttons there on the sidewalk that kind of show, you can come out to this point. When those are placed, like, was that part of the original? Because I know we've got another restaurant, Sages, they have them, but I don't think that I've ever, in my 11 years living in Redmond, I don't think I've ever seen anything outdoors. So when they're being permitted originally and those buttons go down, is there a fee at that point? Okay, so that's never been.
No, those are left over from when this cafe seating was implemented as part of the COVID program. So at that time, there wasn't a fee. Essentially, they came in for a permit, but nothing else associated with that cost.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then I read the flyer that had gone out to the businesses and to community members. Was there anything that also referenced the benchmarks? Because I'm of the opinion you don't know if something's good or not unless you can benchmark it. And I know that we have benchmarked it, but was the benchmarks communicated?
In terms of our comparison to other cities?
Yes.
I'll have to ask Angie or
that was
Patty if that's on the website or not.
No, the flyer you saw was what was sent out.
Okay. Because I would imagine that it would make it easier, say, hey, I need to pay this fee now. However, when we take a look at it, then it's like, yeah, this is appropriate for Redmond, and it's not nearly as bad as what it could be, right? So it's more of making sure that we're covering the cost for our state excise taxes. Is there a way that we can communicate the benchmarks, or does that infringe on anything, or?
No, that's all, public information. It's easy for us to be able to add that to any further information that we put out.
Awesome.
Yep.
And then for the permit fee, I know that a lot goes into calculating fees. And looking at, I believe it was, what did it say? I noted that it's on
The
page
chart.
5. 672 for the annual, and understanding why it would take more resources to handle if we did this seasonally. So I'm in agreement with moving forward on an annual basis. But how did we calculate the 672?
The 672 includes the administrative costs, and so it's the time that it takes to process the application, and then also to inspect it to make sure that it's compliant with the information that was submitted with the application.
So still very reasonable.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Think of it about 5 hours of fully loaded cost for time to process one permit.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions from the council? Councilmember Salahuddin.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate this matrix and the responses here. I noticed the question from Councilmember Stewart previously asked of the businesses obtaining permits during the COVID pandemic and those that are still currently operating. Just to clarify, the response says that there was 12 seating permits issued, and of the 6 public right-of-way, 5 are still in business. Just for my clarification, that means currently there's 5 permits and or outdoor dining establishments.
In the public right-of-way.
Exactly, in the
Correct.
public right-of-way. Perfect. And how many private do we know?
No, we don't keep track since it's on their
Okay.
private property.
Yeah. And then just do we have knowledge or do we have information on how many Bellevue or Bothell or Kirkland have?
We didn't check
No.
that.
Okay.
We can
Yeah,
ask.
that would be great. I'm just wondering for so few businesses that we do have, what's our intention with implementing the cost other than to match what other cities are doing and or get on the schedule of charging? Because I'm thinking, if we cover our permitting fees, if we cover the excise tax, is there a reason to, for 5 public right-of-way businesses to get $4,000? Or is that?
I think it's a matter of gifting public funds, and so we need to recoup a cost for the taking up of the right-of-way.
Perfect, that makes sense. And then that leads to my next question. How is the $2 determined versus $1.05 in Kirkland, $1.68 in Bothell?
So it's based on a recommendation from our consultant, and it's actually lower than what was recommended. So we tried to compare to other cities and noticed that the recommendation by the consultant was higher, so we took it lower to try to fit into what neighboring cities are doing.
Appreciate that, thank you.
The other component, I did have a conversation with a local business owner, and I won't give their name, but we were talking about this proposed fee, and the response was, oh, you mean I can get 180 square feet of usable space where I can probably put, 8 to 10 tables and get those turned over for $1,000, roughly? Yeah, that's a good deal for me. And then he was comparing that to the cost of what he pays for rent and what that 180 square feet would be in one of the buildings downtown. So, the other component on it of having a competitive price, I guess I would almost say, is we want to encourage this use in the sense of activation and get these uses out on the street as well.
Thank you.
Councilmember Fields?
Thank you. If you could indulge me, Director, just for a second, what is the history here? I mean, why? My first thought is, especially on the construction, we've been constructing in all places in Redmond for 10 to 15 years pretty heavily. Why did this not come up before? Why? I'm putting the restaurant use aside for a second, but why did we not deal with this 8 years ago?
So, Councilmember, I can't speak to the past, but I will tell you this was something when I came on board 2 years ago, had a question about this on why we were not charging for use of the right-of-way. And so I went to the mayor and I said, this is a policy proposal that the city needs to adopt, especially as we move from a suburb to a city. And she agreed with that, and we put it forward.
So what I'm going to extract out of that answer is we either ignored it or didn't think of it until you came along.
I don't know if it wasn't thought about, but no one took the action to bring it forward, Councilmember Fields.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm in support of these fees. With respect to the restaurants, I understood, why we did that during the pandemic, because, and I'm not sure if the gifted of public funds, we were potentially violating that, those rules then, or were the circumstances because of a pandemic we weren't doing that. But I do think that in fairness to all businesses, if a business is going to utilize public right-of-way, then there should be a fee. So I'm in support of all these fees. The only other concern I have is that there seems to be an absence of conversation about the safety or distraction of, by some of the spaces in downtown Redmond that are currently being used do create some sort of driving logistics or driving acrobatics or however you want to put it, where you have to, go around and then zip back in order to catch the light in the right lane. So I guess I'm wondering, did we think in terms of the optimal or the okay locations versus any location?
So are you talking about for restaurant seating or when?
Yes.
Okay.
I get the construction is going to be a temporary, and I'm all in favor of those fees, and I wish we had done it years ago. But with respect to restaurant fees, some of those locations, they are a little bit intrusive. So what kind of guidelines are we using there?
I can see what you're talking about, especially with a couple of the locations downtown. I think as this moves forward, and if we get additional requests for lane closures, we're going to have to take a look at that holistically to determine what the impact would be if a restaurant is choosing to request to take up parking spaces versus use of the sidewalk right of way. What we don't want to have happen is, okay, we grant parklet spots, you take up 2 parking spaces, and then a month later, a major construction project is going to be starting on a block over that would impact that or provide that loss of the impact on the loss of parking. So we'll be taking that kind of case-by-case basis. I think right now our position is with those I think it's 1 or 2 restaurants that have parklet spaces right now. Basically, they're kind of being grandfathered in. We will work with those locations to see if potentially there's an alternate to set up, but for right now, we're leaving them as is.
All right, I understand your answer. I'm personally not in favor of grandfathering those in, but I understand your answer, so thank you.
Thank you. And can you clarify when you say parklet, what is it, which one are you referring to?
Parklet's a term where you take a parking space out of use and put a different use in there. So a mini park, for example, or
Sure,
like
yeah.
downtown in front of Palmer's, they have actually built a structure in the street for tables.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I thought you were saying, but I just wanted to be clear which spaces we were talking about.
You bet.
Councilmember Stewart?
Thank you. As we've discussed, on the restaurant side, there are currently 5 businesses who are impacted. I guess the council president can speak to this, but she was able to share some emails prior to this meeting with feedback from business owners who it sounds like would be impacted. My question is, did staff meet with those 5 impacted businesses?
Well, before we answer that, what do you mean by impacted? Like the ones that currently have permits?
Yes, absolutely. Mhm.
So we reached out to them via email and sent them the links to the Let's Connect Redmond, and also gave them the link to the website.
So I'm a little bit uncomfortable with as few businesses that are being immediately impacted. I understand that for the future, folks would be knowing what the new conditions were if they were opting in, but for them to be asked to complete the same form as everyone else feels to me like a little bit insufficient. I hope that when the survey results, when that closes on Monday, that the council will be given a copy of those responses. We've received them from other departments when other surveys close. But all right, that was my initial question. I may have others as the conversation continues. Thank you.
So I would like to bring up one point. Last year, all the cafe seating permits had expired. And we reached out to each of these businesses and let them know, and that was before we were proposing this fee, that, hey, look, you need to renew your permit under the old conditions that had been started under COVID. All 5 of the businesses at the time who currently have a permit, they had no issue with that permitting process. So happy to share the results that we get back, but it's not that they haven't been aware that there is a permitting requirement as well on this process.
Thank you. I'll just jump in on here. I'm not seeing other hands raised at this moment, but I will say, so I was able to both get some emails, which I apologize, I sent just before this meeting and forwarded on from some of the business owners that are impacted or that would be impacted by the change of right-of-way for outdoor dining. And I was able to meet and chat with one of them. And I did think it was a very illuminating conversation because he was like, he basically said, you know, I could handle this, but this is something I have a question about. This is how we could make it work. And this is how also some of the changes that have happened since COVID have impacted me. So I do think, to Councilmember Stewart's point, that if we want to move forward with the outdoor dining piece, I would feel more comfortable if we could do more of that engagement, since we're talking about 5 or 6 businesses. In particular, I think because one of the other pieces of feedback that I heard from actually three of the business owners was just that, you know, they have come through a really tough time. Part of why we put these, we changed the code or we changed the process in COVID was to help these businesses survive. And many of them are just kind of digging out from this really tough time for the dining industry. And so adding additional things. And what I saw in, you know, a variety of different forums where it got posted about this particular topic from our public, which I think you mentioned a little bit showed up in our initial feedback in the survey from the public, was also, our businesses have already been through so much. Why are we kind of getting them while they're down? And I do think that it would be helpful to be able to have that engagement. And I personally would feel more comfortable if we could connect with them to figure out how to make this work better before we move forward on that aspect. I'm perfectly fine with the piece around the use of right-of-way for construction, and would be happy to see that go go for a vote sooner. I don't feel at the moment comfortable with the other piece. I guess one question that I have on that is, especially given this discussion around the gift of public funds, since we have been operating for so long in this other way, I guess one question is, has this come up in an annual audit, or this is an issue that has come up?
It did. And when this is a non-permitted use in the right-of-way. And so during COVID, the city made a decision to allow this non-permitted use. And so went through that process, but the excise tax was being covered by ARPA funds, and so that was a policy decision at that time that the city made in order to support these local businesses. If we do not go forward with this, because essentially adoption of this fee makes this an allowed use within the right-of-way because we're permitting it, we will have to take away the option for these businesses that you're discussing. They won't be able to have this use of the public right-of-way unless the city comes back and says, no, we will subsidize this because we have to pay the excise tax to the state. It's a city cost that we have borne previously.
Got it. So what is the lowest amount we could charge without it being a gift of public funds? I guess that would be my question, and perhaps you don't want to answer it tonight. So I would say I would love to be able to answer that question and be able to look back at this and just cover our costs plus, to be able to be in compliance, because I certainly want us to be in compliance. But I think one of the other pieces, that I looked at, you mentioned about the Let's Connect survey. I looked back at the Let's Connect survey from last year where we asked people about outdoor dining to get the sense of whether people would want that. And 93.9% of the respondents, which we had over 1,000 respondents, said that they felt it was very important to have outdoor dining areas. And many of them also, I think one of the other policy questions, which I would love for us to clarify where we're at on, is just that actually I heard some questions from the business owners was whether or not they would be able to keep their outdoor dining year round. And I saw that also in this survey, that there was a lot of public support for having outdoor dining in the winter, and also heard from the business owners that it would be challenging to take it down, put it back up. So I think they didn't quite have that clarity. I'm curious if you can share some clarity on that, but also just to note this, that there's if we want to see more outdoor dining, because that's what our public is interested in, many cities are shutting down whole streets to be able to allow for this. So it's something for us to think about how we incentivize it almost.
I do. That's why one of the slides actually showcased that the outdoor dining, at least where the sidewalk is involved, that was the reason for the slide with the profile of the cross section of the slide. We have to allow for pedestrian access. So we have locations where we have required sidewalks to be built wider for pedestrians to feel, or people to feel more comfortable, whether they're in a wheelchair or they're 2x2 or 4x4. So we, as a city, have made a conscious effort to build wider sidewalks. So as we make a case for that sidewalk space to be for outdoor dining, and really it was urban spaces or urban centers and the pedestrian access zones, because everywhere else, the minimum sidewalk is, and I'm going off of memory, that's why I'm closing my eyes, I'm going off of memory, the minimum is 6 feet wide everywhere else, and then in the urban centers, 8 feet, and then it's usually in the downtowns and the urban centers where it can be as wide as 17 feet wide. So where there is an opportunity for a business to have an outdoor dining area, so it's a choice where it happens to have that business or outdoor dining business is coming to us because they have the location opportunity first. So that's what the permit is for, is we have staff to analyze, do they have enough space? And that's what the permit fee is for, is to say, yes, you have enough space. The question for the extended use fee is not can you have an outdoor dining space, is are we going to give it away for free? And that's why we're here today.
Thank you. And can you just quickly answer, and then I see multiple hands here, so apologies. Can you quickly just follow up on whether the current move in policy is to have year-round ability for outdoor dining should they get one of these permits, or is there any movement towards restricting that?
Our recommendation is year-round.
Great. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I'm just a little lost here. How exactly is the use of a public asset like a right-of-way a gift of public funds?
Because we've had to pay the excise tax for that, the space that they've taken, the outdoor dining.
Why is there a use tax?
We had to calculate the space of the square footage that the outdoor dining had.
So it's a gift of funds, but it's only because there's no fee currently?
It's like rent on the public right-of-way.
Right. And then is it sidewalk considered a gift of public funds if we don't do that? For the sidewalk permits?
The sidewalk.
Yeah, so if there's sidewalk dining, is it a gift of public funds if people don't, like if they're putting?
Yes.
It is also a gift of public funds?
The city paid for it the last couple of years.
Interesting. And then what about parking? So we don't charge parking, but that would be the similar use of,
The extended use would cover the parklet,
no, actually cars parking in the right of way.
but for more than 2 weeks.
No, you're saying that right now the city provides free parking.
Correct.
How is that not a gift of
Is
public
it
funds?
correct? Okay.
Don't know on that
I'm
one,
just trying
actually.
to follow the logic here, and there may not be any, so acknowledging that. Thank you.
Councilmember Nueva Camina.
Thank you. I truly appreciate all that is going into this from both the city side as well as the small business side, and having a love for small businesses. And I'm taking a look at, again, as Director Burt had mentioned, when you break down what is the increased capacity of the business that the streetery or the outside dining is going to create. What is the increased revenue that's going to come? And if I'm looking at this correctly on page 5, the proposed city of Redmond is looking at a total outlay for the business of, rounding up, we'll call it $1,100. Just want to confirm that.
In the memo, is that what it said?
Yes, at 180 square feet, I think, or 140.
So, again,
180 square feet, yep.
Just restating the opportunity that this gives our small businesses to be able to expand its capacity. And I understand, especially in the world of restaurants, margins are just razor thin. Completely understand that. However, I know that there are businesses where we've been able to experience them in all new ways and increase capacity and also the customer demographics of who's going to some of the locations. So I'm fully on board with the fees, the reasoning why, completely understand it. And while I understand the small businesses, I don't know if we've clearly communicated the whole problem that we share, both as city and small businesses, that we share in getting all of us on the same side of the problem and saying, okay, so this is what's been, and I'm concerned that all that they're hearing is, hey, on top of the fees that you already pay, here, we need some more money from you. And I think that if we tell the story better, then it would be an easier buy-in, and it would be like, yeah, we get it.
Councilmember Salahuddin.
Yeah, thank you. My line of thought was sort of along the lines of Councilmember Anderson in asking about, if a business has an A-frame sign and they keep it outside of their business, would we charge them for that for over 2 weeks right outside of their business? Or similarly, I know we're just talking restaurants here. Those are the ones that have applied outdoor dining. If a business wanted to put a clothing rack out every single day, or are there other right-of-way uses that we're factoring in outside of dining, and would those be charged as well?
No, we're going down a rabbit hole here. I mean, there are provisions relating to signage and outdoor use. This doesn't weigh in on that. We're not going to charge somebody for putting out an A-frame sign.
But, yeah, I guess A-frame is much smaller, but if a vendor or if a small business exclusively sells clothing, would they apply for a permit for outdoor use of space for a small business use, or is this just for outdoor dining?
Just outdoor dining.
Great, thank you.
That's more of a permanent use and a permanent, semi-permanent component that would exist in the right-of-way as compared to, if I'm a clothing boutique, I can roll in and out a sale rack.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, I guess as the conversation continues, and I appreciate the willingness to think creatively here. It's been mentioned, but a really big constituency here is our residents who have experienced a more vibrant community because, and that's not a word, that's like such a political word. I don't use the word vibrant lightly, but it's the perfect word to describe our downtown right now. And I hope that our other urban centers will also get to experience that. So as the conversation kind of is reaching this point, I'm hearing consensus around what is proposed for the construction. I'm hearing the need to solve for future new businesses who want to use the right-of-way for dining spaces, and also maybe we can do something different with these 5. They made it, and they have made our community more vibrant. So again, in a city that is striving for more equitable solutions, that sometimes means we don't treat everyone exactly the same. We treat them how they need to be treated to continue on thriving. So I would be almost in favor, I am in favor of maybe exploring what can we do for these 5 now, and then what would be the ongoing policy for new businesses, and then the construction piece as well. Could we take it in parts?
I'm a little confused by your statement of what can we do for current businesses. Can you expand on that just so we're clear?
If the recommendation from the staff, and I believe your words, Director Burt, you were adamant that it needed to be $2. If it needs to be $2 for new permits moving forward, can it be, to Councilmember Nueva Camina's point, can it be something lower? And I believe that Council President Kritzer asked, what's the lowest we could charge for these existing 5? Is there a smaller number we could charge?
I don't think we're making a recommendation at $2. I didn't say, I don't think we stipulated that we were adamant about that price. That was as we looked at this, based on partner jurisdictions in the area that seem to be a fair and reasonable cost for this benefit. It's the council's prerogative to provide the direction if you feel that $2 is too high, to come up with another amount. But we feel in our analysis as it relates to the amount of staff time that's involved to process a permit with the inspection, and then what that annual fee would be in terms of the net benefit provided to that business, that a $2 per square foot was reasonable on that. But
yeah, it is a conversation for the council.
Some additional guidance.
Yeah. This is a conversation, I think, for us, the body. So I pose that question to my colleagues. Thanks.
Councilmember Anderson?
Thank you. And what I just heard from Councilmember Stewart was, how can we provide you a direction that says what our goal for supporting small businesses in this particular way is in the long run, so that we don't need to have this conversation again, except to update the fee. However, the question I actually would like to know a little bit more about is if we are charging for the space, and I just lost my train of thought. Oh, shoot. That happened. Darn it. You can answer the first question if you like.
I would suggest, that's the reason why if you go to the, with the comparison of why we gave the 180 square foot example, because since it's based on the land value, is because it kind of, I liked how it showed that roughly for an annual, it's roughly $1,000 a year. So just if you were to choose to go lower, that's with 180 square footage as the average for the outdoors dining, you could make a conversation of how lower half or something to go.
Cool. It's $2 per square foot or whatever it was, is very straightforward. So I appreciate that piece of it. My question is if we've added or we've considered 5 hours of staff time, is there also staff time associated with maintenance, or are we foregoing that cost, or because there's something there now? How do we, how does the city benefit from this?
We don't calculate, are you talking about like
tear down, do we have to go back and then incorporate that into our maintenance and operations, or?
So I'm a little confused. Can you state that again for me?
So are there maintenance costs, like annual costs of maintenance for that space that the city takes on? Or is the permit holder responsible for maintaining that?
So there really wouldn't be many maintenance costs associated with this at all. The expectation, I would say, would be that the permit holder maintains that in a functional and workable space, but most of these locations that this would go in, there isn't a critical infrastructure or a maintenance need at these locations.
Okay, and I guess one of the examples would be if we needed to do a seal or overlay or something like that in that spot, it would be a different situation, right?
That would be if, in fact, they were using like a parklet sort of situation and we had a paving project in that area. Yes,
Okay.
we'd make them take that down.
Fantastic, thank you.
Councilmember Fields?
Yes, thank you. Simple question to Director Burt. If we don't tonight get out of this rabbit hole that you described, can we separate these two things for legislation moving forward? If in fact we don't resolve the restaurant space, use of public space, can we do the construction thing? And is council willing to separate these two issues if we can't make any progress tonight?
Yeah, from the executive's standpoint, yeah, they can be decoupled. They are put together as a package because they were dealing holistically with use of the right-of-way.
Well, I will take this opportunity to say, if we don't come to some resolution on the restaurant thing in the next few minutes, I am in strong favor of moving forward with the construction on the as a consent agenda item on the next business, or whenever the business meeting schedule is asked for.
Thank you.
And that was more for my colleagues.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Fields. And I would concur. I think that might be a good direction. So it sounds like there's quite a few outstanding questions and potentially policy options on the fee around outdoor dining that we might look at. Because I don't think we want to like pick a number out of a hat tonight, but it may be if you could come back to us with that information. But we could split these into two separate items. I guess I'll do a thumbs up, thumbs down from my colleagues on whether we could split them. Councilmember Nueva Comuna?
Thank you. I've just got a clarifying question because I'm making an assumption for myself, and I want to be clear for myself. On page 5, where it's the example of the average 180 square foot, we've got it broken down with the permit fee, specifically an annual fee per square foot, the excise tax, which it is what it is, and then the total of that. So is that total cost, is that an annual fee? Is that the cost that they're going to be paying annually? So the permit fee is going to be charged annually. However, assuming, and this is another assumption, but assuming that the straightery doesn't change, it's going to be the same. So then would it be taking the same amount of resources to issue that permit as it did the initial time?
It depends. It really does depend, because there is a process involved, like we have with all right-of-way. Whether somebody comes in, asks to close a sidewalk, or if we're revalidating. So you come in, the application comes in, goes through a review process, plans are checked, prior permit has been checked to see if any conditions have changed. So yes, you could consider potentially, if somebody comes back in, they state, hey, we want to do the same thing in 2026 as we did in 2025. I mean, conceivably, that could be less amount of time, but how our fee structures are set up for basically what we call an over-the-counter permit like this, it's a set fee. We don't get into a sliding scale.
Great, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. And I will note that when I was talking with one of the business owners, they mentioned this in particular, because I think on the business owner side, they were asked as part of the application process, I don't know all the ins and outs, to do like a surveying of their site, and that I guess takes a significant amount of time, even when nothing has changed on it. It's like the same parklet or the same space. So I think that might be another place where we might be able to alleviate a challenge, even if there are going to be some fees, right? Or even, I think the concern about there being multiple paperworks to fill out, of whether there could be a consolidation of the process. So anyway, these are a couple things which I think would be just great for us to be able to connect with the business owners, come back
And communicate,
figure it
is
out.
what I hear.
Yeah, thank you. And I really just also want to say thank you to the staff for the hard work on this, and despite the many questions I have on this, I just want to recognize the really deep thinking into this. So just noting from the council, I saw then general agreement to split the two items. Our council members, does anyone object to us moving forward with the fee proposed for construction? I'm not seeing any objections. I will note that I did get a message from Council Vice President Forsyth that I failed to mention because I was talking about my own comments before this, but she had sent a message saying that she had hoped to be able to also see a code revision language that requires sidewalks to remain open during construction. And recognizing that sometimes sidewalks have to be closed, but that this is something that the accessibility focused community has been asking for a lot. Which is, I think, slightly separate issue, but that's me editorializing from the fees. But I will just bring that up and ask whether that might be, we could look at that in a separate instance, or it would be a part of this.
We'll address that in the issues matrix, but, the traffic control plan is always reviewed when developments are going through the process. So pedestrian access is important.
And that is a condition that we can place on the permit without having to do a code revision. It has just not been the practice in the past about creating walk sheds or anything along those lines. But it is something that we are going to be making a priority moving forward.
Great, yeah. And I will note, I think you do see that in other cities where they have elaborate scaffolding so you can walk through those areas. So definitely a great idea. Okay, so we have that one split, and then our council members, does anyone object if we want to, say, bring this back to committee for more review for the right-of-way use fees for outdoor dining at a future, maybe planning and public works?
I would be happy to see this item back in our committee in early September. I think it would be helpful, especially for the staff and for individual council members, to know what are we expecting to come to that table with. So is it new information? Is it new conversations having happened with businesses? If we could be clear on that, I think that'd be most helpful to prepare, make sure we're having just that one last really good touch on it.
Great. Well, I can share what I've been hearing, and it will also be mixed with my opinion. So if anyone has other opinions, feel free. I would say for me, it would be helpful at that next meeting to have some proposed options on what the fee could look like other than what has been proposed tonight. That might be a lower cost impact, but still cover our costs and allow for some other pieces. And then if possible, to be able to connect. I also know that I did send some of the information belatedly to staff. So if it possible to connect with some of the business owners to come back and say, here's how we'll be answering some of the biggest concerns. Because even though we're just talking about 5 businesses, they are probably indicative of where future businesses might be, so it's helpful to be able to.
We actually have 2 responses of the 5 in the questionnaire that's closing on Friday, so I will get that. Once we close it, I want to get more responses just until Monday, and then I can pre-send the questionnaire to everybody, if that's helpful.
Does that sound like a good plan for everyone? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of nodding. So let's move with that, and then if you want to, I think the only thing that I'll note is that we haven't actually seen any of the resolutions or code updates.
No code, we just learned this week that from Daniel that no code is required to be changed, and so we have the fee resolution that we were going to upload if we went to council on this September 3rd.
Great. If you could just email that to the council so we all can have as much time to review as possible, that would be great. And so it sounds like we're good to put that item on consent and then see the other item back. Hopefully Councilmember Stewart can accommodate that on PPW. Otherwise, we'll put it on another committee. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the council? Kind of wrap that up quickly. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. That brings us to the next item on our agenda, which is the Safer Streets Action Plan status update. And we have Director Carol Helland, Director of Planning and Community Development, to introduce this item. I'll give you a moment to catch your breath. We transitioned quite quickly there. And I'll just take that moment to say thank you again to the staff for their hard work on that last item and for taking our feedback into account.
Thank you, Council President Kritzer. Good evening. I'm Carol Helland. I'm the Director of Planning and Community Development, and this study session is primarily informational this evening, and we will provide a status update on the progress of Redmond's Safer Streets Action Plan. The Safer Streets Action Plan will identify strategies to proactively improve safety of Redmond's transportation system, and it also puts us in a good position to compete effectively for federal and state grant funding. So this study session will include an overview of the goals of the action plan and the anticipated timeline for development of the plan, and staff will also share some preliminary strategies. Staff presenting tonight include Michael Hintz, our Transportation Planning Manager, Francesca Liberti, and Senior Planner, and Sarah Fee as the Deputy Director in Planning and Community Development. And with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Francesca.
Great. Thank you, Director Helland. Again, I'm Francesca Liberti, Senior Transportation Planner here with our Planning and Community Development Department. We look forward to taking your questions after our short presentation about our Safer Streets Action Plan. Today we'll present an overview of our action plan and how this plan will contribute to Redmond's transportation vision. We will review the timeline for completing the plan, and we'll introduce some preliminary strategies that are recommended by staff. The preliminary strategies we're presenting today are high-impact strategies, and our intent is to seek your initial feedback and take a quick temperature check. We'll bring your feedback to our consultant team and make any adjustments as we continue to develop the draft action plan. And finally, we'll close with some upcoming milestones and next steps. As you heard last week during our TMP status update staff report, the following guiding principles and transportation strategies frame the transportation element of the comprehensive plan and provide the foundation for Redmond's transportation future. These principles and strategies remain at the forefront of our Safer Streets Action Plan. This slide will look familiar from our TMP status update last week. This highlights where the Safer Streets Action Plan falls in our ongoing planning efforts. While the action plan is separate from the TMP, we want these documents to work in tandem, with the action plan strategies, policies, and statements in the TMP being mutually supportive. We'll now review a bit of context to better understand why we're developing a Safer Streets Action Plan and how we got to this point in the process. As you may know, Redmond received federal funding from the US DOT Safer Streets for All, or SS4A, funding program. Redmond was one of 6 local governments to receive funding in the first of 5 rounds of funding via a sub-agreement with PSRC, Puget Sound Regional Council. Developing a Safer Streets Action Plan is an important and necessary component to applying for additional funding through USDOT's Safer Streets for All program. We will assess Redmond's prospects for pursuing implementation funding, which could include a variety of things: supplemental planning to support road safety audits, stakeholder engagement, an ADA transition plan, system-wide pedestrian or bicycle counts, or a data dashboard, or demonstration activities such as feasibility studies, engineering studies, education campaigns, or pop-up safety demonstrations. This could also include enforcement training, safe routes to school programming, speed safety cameras, and much more. When we come back to council in Q1 of 2025 with a draft plan, we'll also have recommendations for the types of activities for which we should pursue additional grant funding.
Okay, so the Safer Streets Action Plan that we'll be developing is going to be built upon the SAFE system approach. You may be familiar with this. I think it was reviewed with you when we were bringing forth the local road safety plan. The SAFE system approach has been endorsed by USDOT. It is really the foundation for the National Road Safety Strategy. And it's also the foundation for Puget Sound Regional Council's Regional Safety Action Plan. It has 6 principles, those being death and serious injuries are unacceptable. Humans make mistakes. Humans are vulnerable, particularly to kinetic forces. Responsibility is shared. It's shared between road designers, it's shared between the users, it's shared between policymakers and everyone else that has an influence on the transportation system. Safety is proactive. I think this is a real key point to be made. Redmond currently has a fairly low number of fatal and serious injury crashes on our network. It's a great thing to celebrate. At the same time, we are inviting more and more people to walk and bike on our network. So we really want to be proactive in building the safest system possible so that we can keep our numbers low. And then the final point there is redundancy is crucial. So that is really the linchpin of the safe systems approach. And then there's 3 pillars. So safer people, safer vehicles, safer speeds, safer roads, and post-crash care. These pillars are achieved through a multi-layered approach that includes infrastructure, education and social marketing to promote a safety culture, technologies, legislation, enforcement. The safe system approach is often likened to a stack of sliced Swiss cheese. Imagining each slice is a strategy. The whole is crash risk. The first strategy or second strategy may not work to mitigate that crash risk, but eventually it's going to hit that solid slice of cheese. To me, that's a useful illustration. So speeding is a good example of that. Reducing speeding as a risk factor may involve multiple layers, including fostering a culture that discourages speeding, reducing speed limits, making operational and design changes to encourage slower speeds, and also enforcement, including high visibility enforcement or automated speed enforcement. So that is a great example of the safe system approach at work. So I do want to acknowledge that, and I think some of you asked, what are we doing now, and what kind of safety projects are are being constructed in the pipeline, and I wanted just to bring attention to this, that there is a lot going on from an infrastructure point of view to improve safety of Redmond's roads. The map, and this was also provided in your packet, the map and the associated list that was provided in your packet shows projects that have been completed recently, project that's under construction, and also projects that are funded and currently in design. These all have a safety component to them and will make walking and biking and driving in our transportation system safer for those users. And I guess the last point on that is the safety action plan is going to identify additional safety projects, infrastructure projects, but also a whole gamut of other strategies to improve safety. The timeline on the action plan, so right now we're in the phase of developing strategies, some of which we're going to share with you this evening. We are engaging city staff through a task force that has been convened. We really want to get everybody's perspectives, every department's perspective on the strategies that we're developing, and really understand the real implications of implementing those strategies. Short of it is, we are looking to have a final action plan in Q2 of next year. We're going to bring a draft to you in Q1 of 2025, and we'll be applying for funding through those other programs that Francesca met probably in Q2, Q3 of 2025. So, yeah, as Francesca mentioned at the outset, there was a few policy recommendations that we just want to bring to your attention and kind of get your temperature check, see if there's any that you're particularly interested in, any you want to have more discussion about now or at a later date. And these are really high impact strategies that we'd like to see in the action plan. The first are more, this slide shows more policy-oriented recommendations. The first of which is to update the traffic signal manual. I will say, just walking around Redmond and collaborating with our colleagues in Public Works, Redmond's already doing a lot of great things on this account. Leading pedestrian intervals, if you're familiar with those, giving people a head start as they enter the crosswalk. Protected signal phasing for pedestrians, meaning they have a walk and no cars can take a left turn. And the blank out sign, no turn on red sign at 520 and 154th is another great example. But we want to really capture these great practices in the manual so that they are institutionalized and part of just everyday practice. And so there's some work to do there. The same goes with the roadway geometry standards that are in our street design standards. Some examples are reducing minimum pavement widths for local streets, reducing or removing minimum curb return radii, allowing oncoming lane encroachment where that's allowing larger vehicles to encroach on the oncoming lane. This is a accepted practice in certain situations, and we just want to introduce more flexibility in how Redmond designs its streets. Another piece of this is the updating the speed limit setting policy. Based on what we know of the relationship between speed and crash risk and severity, the city will want to focus on bringing speed limits down to 25 to 30 miles per hour on arterials, with maybe a couple exceptions. So along this line, we want to first conduct a speed study to understand where we can simply change signs and expect people to drive at or near the posted speed versus those streets where changes to the design and operation of the street are needed to achieve that target speed. And we do hope to receive funding through WashDOT to conduct that speed limit study. One thing the city could do without any study is reduce the speed limit on local streets to 20 miles per hour. This is a strategy that cities like Tacoma and Seattle have taken and seen some success with that. The last point on this slide is as you know, we have defined pedestrian priority zones. They're shown in blue on this map. Downtown is the only one that is actually signed, so you'll see these signs at locations as you enter downtown. It says pedestrian priority zone. I think these are areas where pedestrian activity is higher or expected to be higher as mixed-use transit-oriented development continues to occur. And we see these as opportunities to better define what these zones are and how streets should be designed and operated within these zones to maximize pedestrian safety. For example, reduce street widths, reduce speeds, eliminating pedestrian push buttons, raise crossings and intersections to really create these pedestrian spaces. Enforcement and education may also have a role to play in defining these areas.
All right, so in addition to these policies that Michael mentioned, the action plan will also recommend some citywide programs that would address safety concerns. For example, a community engagement campaign would require a partnership between the city's actions, community-based organizations, employers, and the traveling public. In the city of Redmond, 45% of pedestrian-involved crashes and 55% of bicycle-involved crashes in the last 5 years involved impairment, distraction, or disregard on the part of the pedestrian or cyclist. So this community engagement campaign would be focused on active mode users' shared responsibility as well as on drivers following posted speed limits and reducing urgency while driving. All right, in addition to these policies and programs, a proposed automated speed enforcement program would focus on reducing vehicle speeds in areas with vulnerable users, especially school zones and near parks, and would take an equitable approach. The program would not involve red light cameras, as red light camera enforcement does not match with the risk factors identified in the city's crash history data. The proposed speed safety cameras are among FHWA's, the Federal Highway Administration's, proven safety countermeasures and are shown to reduce arterial crashes by up to 54% and reduce injury crashes by up to 47%. The state legislature has recently expanded where agencies can use cameras when specific criteria is met, so such as in a school zone, near parks, or in locations with demonstrated need through an engineering study or other equity analysis. Speed cameras have also been embraced by many local communities. Seattle has school zone speed cameras that have been activated since 2012 in various locations. Bellevue has cameras monitoring 3 elementary school zones. And Kirkland recently had a pilot program that started in 2019. It was shown to be successful and was expanded in 2022 and 2023, and now includes 8 cameras within 4 elementary school zones. When implementing this program, it would be incredibly important to take an equitable approach. We would do this in multiple ways. For example, we would set fines that would be fair and on a sliding scale. We'd provide a warning system for first and second offenses. We would provide alternative methods to fines, such as education or other kind of programmatic opportunities. And we'd be really clear about the message and purpose of this program. So we really want to reduce speeds and make safety improvements, and the revenue from this program would go directly towards that, would go towards making roadways safer and the improvement projects that would do that. And then finally, we have some milestones and next steps. We can go through this quickly and provide additional information if you have questions. But as Michael mentioned, the main point is we'd bring a draft for your feedback in Q1 with then a finalization of this document in and around Q2 of next year. And with that, we can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. Questions from the council? Councilmember Nova Camina.
Thank you. Living downtown and just seeing how we've grown and experiencing varying speeds and all of that myself, I totally appreciate all the work that is going into this, the thoughtfulness behind it. Thank you for this presentation tonight. It's very helpful. I also deeply appreciated, probably more than you have any idea, how much hearing that the city wants to prioritize the safety of anyone who is here, whether it's a resident, a visitor, whatever, that we are putting in the infrastructure and making it a priority for human safety. I love the redundancy is crucial, and that that's going to be the linchpin. Michael, I believe that that's the words that you used on it, that is going to be. And I see that as throughout the departments, throughout the city, and how making that the priority, that we're going to build the infrastructure to ensure the safety of human beings is just absolutely music to my soul. So thank you for that. When, of course, we saw on here on page 11, talking about the speed safety cameras. It's, of course, been a pretty hot topic around civil rights or civil liberties and making sure that we're not impinging on this. On the other side of this, I will say that, full disclosure, I've received a speeding ticket in the city of Kirkland in one of those elementary schools. It was a non-school day, and those cameras don't care. But what it did do was definitely have me make sure that I am well below the speeding limit when I'm going through those areas. So it was highly effective. So when we're looking at possibilities of the speed safety cameras around the parks and school zones, are we also starting to look at the policy, or are we waiting to, while we've got conversation around data policy for police, are we waiting for that, or kind of where do we sit with that?
Go ahead if you.
Yeah, I think this is in development, and I think we'd want to, any data policy that is being developed, in my understanding there is a data policy being developed, we'd want to be sure addresses the use of automated safety cameras. I will say that there have been concerns, civil liberty concerns around automated enforcement. And that's why it's very important to roll this out in an equitable way. The cameras do not capture any information of the individual other than their license plate, right? And I was part of that, or I was here for the conversation around the license plate reader technology that is being pursued as well. So it's similar in that whoever's driving or whoever's car that is that's violating the speed limit would, there'd be a record of that. So, do you have anything to add, Seraphy?
Yeah, I was going to say in short that this is why they're preliminary strategies, and hearing from you this feedback, and that you want us to be working. We already were going to be working with police, and actually I just checked in with Deputy Coates before this meeting because I thought we might get asked this question. So that's definitely something that we'll be incorporating, making sure that the policies are aligned.
I just wanted to add on to that. Speed is one of those things that is such an important issue for us to consider in the context of our city. And it does get back to what Michael mentioned earlier, which is a culture of moving slower. I think Councilmember Fields brought up some really good points when we talked about these topics last year, when we were talking about things that were happening in the Netherlands and bike cultures in other places. And it is because it is culturally ingrained to move slower, be attentive, watch out for bikes. It's everyone's responsibility. We all care for each other. So actually, Redmond has deployed many speed signs that do track your speed, which I think gives some instantaneous kind of biofeedback of you're going too fast before it's enforced. But there was just an interesting conversation that I think I saw I think it came through the council, was a conversation for someone saying, please raise the speed on this street because I tend to go faster because it's on a hill. And it was like the actual reverse of that context is true, that I actually live near that hill and I see how fast people go, and actually ensuring that people are going slower around those bus stops, it's around an elementary school, it's around other locations, really will start having a culture change because you're reinforcing basically that information about how people should be behaving and how they should be driving.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fields?
Yeah, I certainly want to echo Councilmember Nueva Camina's appreciation of this plan. You're covering so many really important and critical aspects to making this successful. I have nothing but praise. I do have a comment, and I will, and thank you, Director Helen, for your comments, because I do see success in other places, and including, I think I mentioned on a trip I took to Mexico, I was completely surprised and amazed in the city I went to, the courtesy extended to me on a bicycle. So I have a framework for exactly what was described as a shared responsibility. My comment is anecdotal, and it's partly just being a driver, partly being a motorcycle driver and a bicyclist in our city. And what I see more often than I have recalled in years past is the people entering an intersection, even as the light is already red. Now, we may not have data of, at this point, of people being hurt or killed because of that, but to me, that's just a loaded gun that somebody's playing with. And my guess is that you don't have a whole lot of data about children being hurt in school zones. There's probably not that many, but I do certainly support and appreciate the protections that we're doing in parks and, as Director Helen said, bus stops. I would like to see more. I'm sure that there's just a real uphill battle here, but and I had a complete turnaround from what I thought 5-6 years ago. But I would like to see more use of camera enforcement directed towards creating safety on intersections, on people who violate red lights. I don't want to see people getting tickets, $400 tickets, because they just barely got through the intersection before it changed red. But the flagrant disregard for safety of people speeding up and crashing through an intersection after the lights turn red, and I see those pedestrians on their cell phones, not looking up, but knowing that the light changed and starting to walk, and yes, they're contributing to their own demise. But holy smokes, we have to take that serious, and it's happening. I can't have seen it that many times and not. It didn't just happen when I saw it. It has happened hundreds and hundreds and thousands of times in our community. That's my pitch. Please consider red light camera enforcement.
Councilmember Anderson?
One of the things I've noticed about Seattle's Vision Zero program is they have a really simple neighborhood option where they can get signs that says like 20 is plenty. So I heard from this, I also really appreciate the plan and some of the features in it, but one of the things was the study that was hopefully going to be funded by WashDOT. I'm hopeful that there may be an opportunity here for us as council even to help you out with potentially helping some of the communities that have come to the council and asked for signage or reduced speed limits, but maybe as an entry into that program, before we find that data, we can actually seek a connection opportunity with community members and offer them a sign that they could put in their front yard. Signs are pretty cheap, so we could probably get them made, and then I think it would be a really fun project for council. So
We actually do that. So thank you we have the signs.
awesome.
Put
us to work.
Yeah, we can definitely make those connections through Deidre.
Awesome. Thank you.
Councilmember Salahuddin?
Thank you so much for this entire presentation. Really appreciate all of the strategies laid out. Also want to talk about the automated enforcement and how supportive I am. Specifically, I have a question that will likely lead to a comment. the second bullet point, located in recommended locations. Do we have a gauge of which neighborhoods that would be in front of which schools and or parks? And that would lead to my comment in that I know it costs more for all of these different lights. I would love to see one outside of every school, ensuring that we have consistency outside of each of our schools, if that's not already going to be the case.
Yeah, that's something that's still, the specific locations and quantities of these cameras still in development. That's why we wanted to get kind of a quick preliminary temperature check with all of you. So that would come probably in Q1 of 2025 when we bring the draft plan.
Thank you. Yeah, just to ensure that the consistency in how our school-age children are we're taking the safety across the city equally. Thank you.
So I'm hearing quite a lot of support, it sounds like, from council members on the speed safety cameras, especially those located in kind of school and park zones where kind of more vulnerable populations are. Councilmember Fields did raise the question of photo enforcement of red lights or red light cameras. Is that something that there is interest in the council having us pursue more broadly? I just want to make sure we know where we're getting some preliminary feedback and temperature check on preliminary policies and strategies.
Thanks for posing that question. I think we still have a few to make comments, but then we can do a go around on some of that. Councilmember Stewart, did you have your hand raised?
Yes, I did. Not in response to the question from Director Hellens via Councilmember Fields, actually. But I just wanted to say, first of all, thanks so much. This is so exciting because this is what the community's, been asking for. And the Swiss cheese model is like the perfect metaphor. So we'll have that forever now. I also wanted to note for the council, we've got these council conversations that are being rescheduled. We've got one coming up this fall. We'll have one in January, it sounds like. And then this plan, actually, I'm on the near last slide of the presentation, is actually set to be completed in Q2 of next year. So as we look toward our council conversation for early summer next year, having an opportunity to have that safety focused and sharing about the community's feedback that has been integrated into this just could be a potential idea for having a safety themed conversation with the council, because we know it's so important to community. We hear a lot of interest in it. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Are there other hands raised? Otherwise, I'll jump in with my thoughts as well. And appreciate that last comment. I think that would be great. I'll just say, it's really cool also thinking about us now 2 years ago passing our Vision Zero resolution, and then seeing all the work that's happened since then, just building out all these safety plans. And obviously there was a lot of work going on before that as well with our original commitments around safety, but just this acceleration in commitment to safety and really trying to get towards that vision of zero, right? So I want to say thank you to all the staff that are working on this, and excited to see this plan progressing. I think I am also on. I think overall, I love a lot of these different aspects. I'd say actually, in particular, I want to call out on the signals for walking strategies of, I think one of the places where I've personally known people who've been hurt have been with that turn into a crosswalk. And so I think having more of those kind of dedicated crossings is really key. And excited to see some more of those projects come forward. And I know we've heard a lot of good feedback from some of the ones we've initially put in of some of the key signs, also for biking as well, when we have bikers go across, so that they have their own pieces and signals. I would say in terms of the speed cameras in school zones, I think I'm a little torn on it, but I think overall that it does, if we can be able to share with our public about the ways that it will help to improve safety, then I think that's key. I guess one question for me, and this would be a question actually on the red light cameras, before I feel comfortable moving forward with the red light cameras piece, I would want to go to a Let's Connect survey to be able to go out to the public and get their input on that. I think the speed cameras, will take, even just the ones in the school zones, will take us a good amount of public engagement to explain to people kind of how they will work. I think I love the idea of being able to have warnings for the first couple offenses so people can get a little bit more attached to those. I think one of the questions that Council Vice President Forsyth had sent to me on that I'll just bring up was whether those will be only activated while there's like a light flashing and during school times, or will it be during all times?
That's a great question. Yeah, so if we look to Seattle as an example, they're activated only during school, the dedicated school arrival dismissal times. So they have those times defined and they're signed.
And how would the park zones work then, if there's not
Parks,
a park time?
Yeah, park zones and other speed cameras that are not in any of those zones would be 24 hours.
Okay, thank you. And I think maybe before we would actually move forward on any of these projects, I guess I would want to see the specific locations and how those are going to work, as well as the communications plan. So
Yeah, one last thing. I think the speed study, when we do that, would help inform that, those locations. And I think rolling them out in school zones as a first step is easy to message and easy to communicate, and I think easy to get community buy-in on. And there's been great, success in this program. You can look to Seattle, and when they first rolled those out in 2012, I believe they pulled in millions of dollars, and over time that revenue has gone down. And that's a good sign. That's what you want to happen. And I personally see, and I think a lot of safety professionals, traffic safety professionals, see cameras as an interim step towards a final goal of designing our streets so that people go slowly and having a culture in which people feel they need to go slowly. So they're not a forever strategy.
I guess I'll just yes and on that I think, especially what you said of maybe we start with the schools, and then as the proof of concept and the thing that people really can understand. And I guess that's where I would be at in terms of the proposal Councilmember Fields brought up, maybe before we'd move to like red light cameras, is to start with one piece and then to kind of look at the policy as it evolves. But that's just my 2 cents. Of course, we can go around. I see.
Yeah,
Director Allen,
I just wanted to jump in and say, like, this discussion is what's really helpful for us of knowing where to put staff time over this next year. And as you saw, we have a lot of programs and policies and strategies. And so hearing particularly what you're most interested in pursuing, as we said, there's, lots of different ones we can do. And so what we adopt necessarily doesn't have to be the only place that we stop, right? As you said. And so what I'm hearing is maybe coming back with more options too, between all that. So if only starting in schools, and then the council can kind of do all the schools, few of the schools, let you all kind of discuss. And so we'll come with some of those options. I think with the red light, we were not planning to pursue because it does take a lot of engagement, community engagement. But if the council is interested in what really we're saying is hearing more, that's what we'll come back with. It's not something you're necessarily agreeing to do tonight. We'll come back with that research and share more with you on that. So it's helpful just to know.
Yeah, that's great, because I do think I just researched this a little bit about how these policies have played out in other cities, and I do think there's been some places where there's been some kind of community pushback, especially on the red light cameras. So, but obviously, safety. We have to decide what our goals are here. For me, I have a daughter who's just about to be walking to school every day through some of these school zones, and do want to make sure that we can keep those places safe. So appreciate you bringing this forward. Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, thank you so much, Deputy Director. In terms of level setting and which altitude are we at the moment, I guess by way of for something for you all to take back, and if you glean something from it, great. There actually is a red light camera at the near our boundary with Bellevue at 148th and Bell Red, and I would be curious, because it's been there for a number of years, if it has made the intersection more safe. So maybe one way to measure that is through the fines that have accumulated over time. But has it actually kept the neighborhood safer in that area? That would be something I'd be curious to know as we consider them for having them more on our side of the boundary.
We can easily check that information and get it. There's one farther down 156th also, even with a park that's on 156 in Bellevue, so we can ask them for that
Yeah,
data.
wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And council members, curious if anyone else wants to weigh in on the red light cameras question with thoughts on that. Not seeing additional weigh in there. All right, so I think you've got some answers there. The only other one that I realized that Council Vice President Forsyth had sent in was whether she noted that she didn't see pedestrian scrambles or the diagonal crossings, the always move, and was just curious if you could elaborate where in our busiest areas those are being studied or considered.
That was, sorry. Go for it. That was one of the examples I forgot to mention when talking about updating the traffic signal manual to include pedestrian scrambles in that. And as part of that, we would want to develop criteria for where those are appropriate. Typically, those are appropriate where you have high volumes of pedestrian activity relative to vehicle activity. Also, T intersections are common places where those are implemented as well, just because it has simpler traffic operations. But yeah, we can definitely look into and maybe come to you with some ideas on candidate locations.
Great, thank you. And just coming to mind as we're preparing for light rail arrival into our downtown core, that definitely would be an interesting area to be able to study for those. Any other comments? Councilmember Nueva Camina.
Thank you. Took me just a quick second going back to the red light cameras. It's been a long day. I know that we've also got, going back to our other conversation with police and looking at the flock cameras and seeing possible redundancy and wondering like if we're moving forward with license plate readers, we're looking at red light cameras, we're looking at speed for in around schools and parks. Is there some overlap to where we could be going with one system and not the other, so that we don't have different programmings or funding going for this or that, or is the source of the funding determinant on who we go with and what solutions? Like, because it seems like we've got a couple of things that are, it's still a camera, it's still, capturing a license plate or a speed. Do we need, 2 or 3 different systems to do this, or is there, one camera to rule them all?
So I'll jump in to answer that, in that we will be coming back to you with that information. With automated enforcement, that would be a close partnership that police would be operating anyways. And so that's definitely something that we'll be partnering with.
Yeah. As well, I absolutely love the redundancy is key piece. I also know that when we're working with funds and wanting to steward them well, it's like, well, how can we be strategic in it and not have the redundancy in spending? Unless, of course, there's good reason, because, again, source funding, what is this specifically for, that kind of thing. But just wanting to make sure that I've got a solid answer when constituents are asking. Thank you.
We can make sure to have that by Q1.
Thank you. Any other questions? Is there anything that you need in terms of direction from the council other than what we've provided? Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the work on this and for the great update. I'm so excited for the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the Maintenance and Operations Center Master Plan update. And we have Aaron Burt here, our Public Works Director, who will call back up to introduce this item.
All right. Good evening, council members. Aaron Burt, Public Works Director. I'm joined this evening by Scott Wolf. Let's see. Are you the president and owner of Miller Hole or just a principal?
I'm a partner at Miller
Partner.
Hall
There we
Partnership.
go.
Yeah, we're architects and planners in Seattle.
Great. And they have been our partners in the establishment of the MOC master plan and concept that we're going to talk about tonight. So where are we? As part of the CIP, the 23-24 CIP, council provided funding for us to begin a master planning process to take a look at the needs out at the MOC. And also as part of that, it was about a $7.5 million allocation. Also money set aside for us to begin design and planning, or excuse me, design once we came up with a master planning concept. So as we took a look at this longstanding need, what we put together some project goals, and a couple of the big things that we're looking at was that we're planning for the future in spirit of the Redmond 2050 program, that we really wanted to create a legacy facility that will last for generations to come. That, of course, it's sustainable, functional, and flexible, and also that we're looking at needs today, but forecasting for needs in the future, and that being it fosters efficiency and collaboration, and that we created a workplace environment that was connected with one another and provided the foundation for us to provide the support to the community as a whole. And then also one of the biggest takeaways was to establish a rough order of magnitude cost of what such a facility would cost us to implement. So this is the current layout of the MOC site. It's about 8.5 acres. It's a hot mess. There really was no master planning process done. It's cobbled together. If you've spent some time out there, you can understand that it's a dysfunctional location. There's no connection in terms of storage, layout of the site, efficiencies. Money has been spent on the location over the years. If to the left there is the current MOC building in gray. That was built in 1975. It has had some upgrades over the years. Apparently at that time when the council funded that building, the intent was to have a couple additional phases of build out at that location, but the follow-on decisions were made not to implement any additional phases. So over the past 45, 50 years, as needs have changed at the location as staff has grown, it's just been a hodgepodge of added structures and uses on the site. Right now, out at the MOC, it's basically all our maintenance functions and facilities, to include the Parks Administration for maintenance and operations. And we have roughly about 151 plus employees between Parks and Public Works. That does not include our seasonal employees that get added over this about 6-month period, summer, and you're looking at adding anywhere from 20 to 30 additional employees that need to be accommodated out on the site. Couple photos of the current existing conditions. You can tell that it's probably not the best work environment in terms of motivation to come into work. It's actually, I'll use the term, pretty depressing, just because of the fact that it is and it has been hobbled together over the years, and the city has not made it a priority to keep up with maintenance at this site or make the necessary adjustments to make it a functional and workable site for both the Parks and the Public Works staff who work in there day in and day out. What we want to do, though, with this project and the biggest outcome is strive to create a 100-year facility. And in doing so, take the time here in the front end to design a project that is efficient and sustainable and lasting, and most importantly, create a facility that can weather the test of time. So the choice of materials and form and function that can be easily upgraded and or repaired, and also create a flexible, usable space that can adapt to changing needs. Because we don't know what our maintenance needs are going to be in terms of staffing in 50 years. We can take a rough estimation, but we definitely want to create a foundation that would allow for adaptive use in the long run. So where are we? We started a process last year in 2023, and that process, working with Miller Hole, we shot for the moon. Essentially, we put everything on the table, and we did a top-to-bottom scrub of what we are anticipating needs. And partially when we did that initial scoping project, we didn't put a lot of, I would say, barriers on in terms of when we went to staff, went to the different divisions and the two departments, and we said, okay, let's think big, really. What would this look like in 100 years? And boy, did staff think big. Hey, we're going to grow by 50% or 100%, and I'm going to need 8 more times the amount of square footage than I have today. And we're going to have flying cars and, nuclear-powered Vector trucks. I mean, it was a good exercise for us. But what we had to do is we had to put a hard stop on that, because what we quickly realized was, hey, we got a little off track on this. So we stopped the process, we reeled it back. We, working with our partners at Miller Hole and their sub-consultants, we took a hard look at, okay, what are our assumptions moving into this? What is realistic? And we came up with this new timeline and to where we are today. And so to me, it was not a aspect of wasted time, because one of the things that I came away from, and I think the project team came away from when we kind of shot for the moon, was really, it was a real focus in terms of what do we need now, and thinking about the problem set of the individuals who were in place now, thinking about, okay, well, what would I want versus what do we actually need from an operational standpoint? And once we stepped back from that and said, okay, we have what we have now, but let's really think about programmatic implementation in the long run, and how can we be realistic about that? So one of the things we did, for example, is we went back and we took a look at historical growth of staff sizes within these various programs. And we don't really grow that much as a maintenance operations staff, both within Public Works and Parks. We have need, but Redmond, from a physical footprint, is not really going to be expanding any further. We're at the edges of the urban growth boundary. So we took a look at this from a programmatic component of, if we grow our capacity to provide additional services, what kind of staffing levels would we need over like a 25-year period? And what we were able to determine on that was we really scaled that back and figured that, okay, over a 25-year period, maybe we would see programmatic growth in terms of FTEs by about 5%. So, rather than thinking we're going to grow by 20 people over 50 years, over a 25-year period, we said, okay, maybe 5 or 6 employees within a various function. So it really grounded us kind of in the reality of what our future needs were going to be. So here we are actually we're in early August now, presenting this overview here to council. At the end, as we go through this, we'll talk about what Public Works and our partners in Parks feel is our preferred option to move forward, and then the timeline to do so. Because we pay some consultants who have some great concepts, and they love to get on the whiteboard and throw stickies up there and draw, Scott and his team worked through this in various workshops over a couple months, and they came up with basically 3 site concepts. And some of our assumptions that we put into this was taking a look at what could be adaptive reuse of buildings on site? And in Site Concept 1, the adaptive reuse would be the Trinity building, which right now houses a couple of our operating functions within Public Works. It's mostly a storage site, and then the Parks the Parks Administration building in the northeast corner of the site. This would entail a new MOC building. I believe in Site Concept 1, we anticipated that to be about, 3 stories? And then we were looking at essentially replacing or adding in a parking structure. We're anticipating over the course of time being out there, we're still going to need to provide parking based on the location of where this is at in Redmond. The majority of our employees, especially considering that they live outside of Redmond, they drive single-car vehicles. But one of the baseline assumptions I want to add when we start talking about a parking structure on site is we anticipate about an 85%, providing parking for about 85% of the employees on site. That accounts for the fact that some people actually do bicycle, and some people do take mass transit to the site, but it just wouldn't be feasible for us to provide 100% parking density to include the various vehicles that we have on site. Site Concept 2 had us keep the Parks Administration building in the upper right corner, putting in a new MOC building that we'd center more towards the center of the facility. You'll see that where the Trinity building is, we mark that as parking. We're leaving that in this site concept as a parking option that we would build a structure on, but depending on the parking need or I should say the parking density that we end up deciding to go at, it could be anywhere from a 2 to 3 story or 4-story parking structure. And then the final site concept is essentially taking out all the existing buildings on site, putting in a new MOC building that would include fleet maintenance incorporated into that building, and then building a parking structure. And in there, we go through some pros and cons, talking a little bit about circulation and access and some of the operational differentiators that we're taking a look at, and then how we would combine the use on the site. I want to point out that these numbers are a rough order of magnitude. These are what we consider to be hard costs for construction of the base site. And then what we're doing here is showing how each of the site options have an additive function or an additive cost. So Site Concept 1, which entails reusing the Trinity building and the Parks Administration building, to get everything else built and the site reconfigured, that would cost us about $126 million in rough order of magnitude dollars. We determined that the optimal parking structure, so we could have an apples to apples comparison here on site, would be a 3-story parking garage that we would build on site. If we wanted to keep the 2 buildings on site, so the Parks building and the Trinity building, you have to add additive costs to bring those buildings up to code. Once we go in there and begin to remodel and make any changes, that's going to trigger new electrical, new mechanical, and new energy codes. So it has a additive cost right there of about 16 and a half or 16.8, almost $17 million. If you go into option 2, this is where we talk about taking down the Trinity building, but repurposing and reusing the Parks Administration building. Now you're looking at additional site concept based hardline costs, building the parking structure, but we would still trigger the cost to upgrade the Parks Administration building. But then Site Concept 3, the $144 million as a baseline cost includes the demolition of the Trinity building and the Parks Administration Building, because we're wiping those two structures off of the site. So those costs to demo those are included in the option 3 baseline costs, and then the $25 million to build the parking structure. We went through, took a look at kind of pros and cons of each of the various options. Each thing has benefits and drawbacks as a whole, but essentially what we came up with when we really look at it, that the best way to go forward on this site would be what we're calling our preliminary preferred option. Little bit change of site concept 3, but kind of a realignment of the layout of the site, wiping the slate clean and starting fresh. And so that would entail building a new MOC building that we took a look at space needs from a programmatic standpoint of everything that would remain out on site. And based on the square footage that was identified, and those square footage needs will eventually, as we get into design, will be pulled down even further. But we figured that with fleet operations and other operational needs, we would need about a 2-story MOC building 1 is what we're calling. This entails building a 3-story parking structure. The nice thing about this preferred option and where we're putting the preferred parking structure, taking out the Trinity building, is the ingress and egress to that parking structure is away from the intersection down there at 76, so it's reducing any component of backup or additional traffic pressures at that location. Great concept and layout for site circulation. It puts some of our lesser used functions up in the northeast corner. That's where we'd put our mineral storage bins. We'd have covered parking along the fence line to the north. And then we maintain what we call our decant facility, if you're familiar with that term. The decant facility is a structure where our street sweepers, or anytime we collect some of the nasties from our HVAC, our Vector trucks, that's where we go and dump it. It's a clean facility, it's contained, and then we do the disposal from that. That facility was built a number of years ago at considerable cost. It's up to code, and it's one of the best decant facilities here in the Puget Sound region, so we definitely want to keep that and keep that operational. A couple of other things I want to point out about the preferred option is to the west. That would entail us getting a access easement from UPS. So to the west of our location right there, UPS has a ingress egress to their UPS yard. We've had some preliminary discussions with UPS about being able to purchase or lease a access easement. They don't seem to have any issue with that. That helps with our circulation through the site. And then to the west there, it is open circulation. There's a driveway that runs up next to, there's a warehouse there that kind of on the cutout. If you've been out to the site, that's an open easement that we have that won't be blocked off. We feel across the board that this layout provides the most functionality and flexibility for us to grow in the future and also to be able to adapt. For example, on the north side where we have the covered parking, if as we continue to go through our fleet refinement, scale back on fleet size, if we need to convert some of that covered parking, which would be an open covered parking, we could change that out for closed storage parking or other needs across the board. From a green space requirement, right now the code states that we need to provide 20% open space on site. This preferred option provides that for us across the board. And that does not include any option for us as we get into design looking at green roofs on the MOC building itself. solar panels on the covered parking on the north side of the site as a whole, or even doing some sort of adaptive solar use on top of the parking garage as well. So a lot of different options. Rough costs for us here across the board, about $170 million. These numbers here, and Scott will attest to this as we get into questions about how we got here, are extremely conservative. And these numbers reflect an anticipated escalation of 4.5% between now through construction in 2029. So what you are seeing is not only a conservative estimate for these costs, but also with built-in cost inflation up through 2029. Biggest cost driver, obviously, is the MOC building. Some of the unknowns, though, that we have to take a hard look at when we get into this is anytime you tear something down and begin to dig up what you have underground is the utility costs. We do have anticipated that some of the stormwater infrastructure on site is actually in pretty good condition, and we anticipate being able to use, for example, the on-site stormwater vault that's already exists, so that saves money for us moving forward. So our next steps for us here. We are now in August, and what our intent is to use the design money that we have allocated as part of this year's CIP to move forward with this process to use progressive design build. So progressive design build is an alternative delivery method that rather than the traditional design bid build. It is a process that is really focused on value engineering and finding cost savings within the design process, because what you're doing is when you go out for bid, you are getting a complete package of the designer, so the architect and the contractor at the same time. So they bid for the project together, and that gives the benefit of being able to better manage risk through the identification of the schedule, costs, and any potential changes as you go through design, because both the contractor and the designer are tied at the hip, and they both have a, I guess you could say, a economic incentive to work together to deliver the project in the most effective means and ability up front. And it also gives us a real opportunity to engage with the contractor early, because the individuals that are going to bid on this type of project, they normally tend to work with a preferred designer, so they know the strengths and weaknesses both of the contractor and the designer, and it gives us that opportunity to collaborate and understand what that process is going to be early on versus, hey, if we do a design, we let out a contract for a designer. Then we put it out for bid. And when you put it out in design, bid, build, that's lowest bidder. And so you don't know necessarily who you're going to get in terms of the contractor. And then it goes into construction, you get into construction management and all the fun associated with that. With design, bid, build, it's not necessarily the lowest bidder that you award the contract to. It is who best can deliver the project based on the project goals, schedule, and expectations that you put forward as part of the RFQ and RFP process. Couple things, though, that we need to do here internally is we need to move forward and put out a RFQ or RFP for a owner's representative. So obviously, this is a project that is very large, complicated in scale and scope. I have many capable people within the Public Works Department, but for the magnitude and scope of this project, what we are going to need to do is hire on an owner's representative. So essentially, that individual or that firm that we hire becomes our owner's rep. We work in conjunction with them. They're doing quite a bit of the interface and engagement with the designer and the contractor, whomever we select. They're our seat at the table. They're handling contract administration with oversight from the Public Works Department, and they're also handling that day-to-day construction implementation and management and oversight. And then additionally, what they're able to do is in order to go forward with progressive design build, we have to take it in front of the state to go, excuse me, got a page ahead, to take it in front of, CPARP board, the Capital Planning and Advisory Board. So sorry about that. There's an application process involved with that. Essentially, we put together the concept, we put together the scope, we take it in front of the board, and they bless off that says, yes, the city can do this alternative design and delivery method. It's the same thing that we did with the Redmond Community Center when we did GCCM. We had to put together a proposal, they take it in front of the board, they bless off on it. In our initial discussions with folks about this preferred delivery method, and the feedback we've gotten is that this type of project is tailor-made for a progressive design bid build because there's a lot of knowns that we already know going into it. There is risk involved, but with the final implementation and the goals that we have for it and the phasing in terms of how we would build this project, it makes sense for this type of delivery method. So where are we? Our next steps, excuse me, back up a page, is we are going to move forward with the progressive design bid process. We're going to go out here. We're developing the RFP right now. We'll go out for the owner's representative process. We'll get that person on board. We'll put together the package for the state board. And then the next touch point, essentially, as we come back, will be after we've developed the RFQ, the RFP for the design, the designer and the contractors, the next full engagement by the council on the approvals that we'll need would be for that contract for implementation going forward. So I know that was fast and furious, but happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Questions from the council? Councilmember Stewart?
I'll go ahead and kick us off. Thank you, Director Burt. I think we all share your enthusiasm for making sure the MOC is a great place to work. That's been important to this council. I have two small questions and then a bigger picture question. So this conversation picks up like a year since we've last, in a big way, had a conversation about what the council was hoping to see. It's just been a minute since those earlier discussions. So one of the things I remember from those earlier discussions is the removal of the fuel tank that is currently in the ground. Is it still in the ground?
No, it's been decommissioned. So what we have on site is an emergency fueling component, and the fleet operations has transitioned to fuel cards.
Okay, great. So because my question was to make sure that the design is that you're working toward is going to continue on with the elimination of that tank. When you say it's decommissioned, that means it's still in the ground?
It's underground. Yes, it's been emptied, and yeah, the intent, we will have an emergency fueling capability on site, which we're anticipating probably would be 2 500-gallon tanks, but nothing underground moving forward.
And then the fleet study, which we're going to hear more about next month, I imagine that has recommendations for transition of not just the fleet we've been able to transition so far, the types of vehicles, but the larger ones we know. If this is a 100-year facility, we know the larger ones are eventually. So all of that has been baked into the design here so far.
Well, yes, so in part of the crafting of the preferred alternative. We are accounting for the need long-term for the build-out of robust electrical infrastructure, as we continue to transition the fleet. That cost and those cost estimations, once we get into actual design, we'll be able to neck that down to make that determination of really what scale and scope of infrastructure we'll have to put in for an electrical fleet.
I very much understand that and appreciate that. I also think it's important to ask for what we need, right, as we grow in all of that. And to the same extent, I find it difficult to judge the three alternatives one after the other because I don't work there every day. But I know I want it to be a great place to work, and I know we need it to be functional and to be able to deliver great service to our city. So if you need a third story on your building, it's only 2 here now, but I would wonder if you needed a third story or if it could be built in a way that a third could be added. That's pie in the sky, but really just making sure we're getting what we need. My last big picture question is I'm still not super clear on, I think because we used different language throughout the conversation, but the progressive design build and why we need to go to the Capital Projects Advisory Review Board. You mentioned too that they need to bless that because there is some risk, and I would love to make sure that I'm able to understand fully the risks associated with that. So I could almost use a memo just on this piece of it to better understand that. I will go back and rewatch your description of it, but this piece I just want to make sure we're able to really understand.
Yeah, 2 points. We have talked about adding a third story that we would use as essentially, it's easy to build a shell and then have the capacity to build out into that in the future. So that's definitely something that we've talked about. And then for progressive design build, as a matter of fact, Miller Hole has put together an excellent technical memo that we can share with the council that goes through the differentiation between the 3 different types. But Scott, if you want to talk a little bit about why we're choosing progressive design bid.
Sure. Yeah. So as Director Burt said, we did prepare a technical memo as part of our obligations in the master plan work that we've done. And the purpose of that memo is really looking at all of the different delivery methods that are available to organizations for successfully delivering projects like this. So in that memo, which we can provide based on that request, is a comparison really of the pros and cons for each delivery method. And as you might expect, different types of projects tend to lead to different types of preferred delivery methods. So that technical memo was a very objective way of looking at the different options available. There were case studies that were provided that show past projects under each delivery method. And out of that memo, when considering the fact that this facility needs to continue to operate during construction, there will undoubtedly be some sequencing that is required on the site to make sure existing functions continue to operate while new ones are being built, and there's no disruption to the services that are being provided out of this facility. That's a very complex and complicated set of project criteria. When you get more complex like that, it tends to direct towards alternative project delivery methods. If we were trying to describe all of those sequences and requirements in a design bid build traditional delivery method, as Director Burt said, that there's plenty of opportunity for things to go awry. But when you get the team to the table at the beginning with a collaborative alternative delivery, there's much more of an opportunity to work together with the folks that are working at the site to make sure that the sequence of operations and constructions are being planned and delivered in a way that minimizes the impact to the ongoing operations.
Thank you. I do think that memo would be helpful, and I appreciate your help on this. I guess just to wrap up my initial thoughts then on all of it, Director Burt, your department by budget is like a third of the city budget, and you don't ask for nearly as many tools and new technology as some of the other departments. So again, just ask for what you need here because we want it to be a really great place and to provide great service as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Fields.
Yes, it's a request. So I know that ideally we as project people always want to pretend to ourselves that scope, schedule, and budget are all equal in a project. And that's not necessarily true. You know, we have this, as Councilmember Stewart was describing, the scope ads and how important getting it right would be. We also have a building, as you described, Director Burt, as problematic, and I'm not really sure what the lifetime left before it becomes even critically problematic. And as I recall, the last time you presented, there was some discussion of a gap, and I think the gap was described as our ability to fund it in general. Not even, we didn't have the money in the bank, but do we have the borrowing capacity, et cetera, et cetera. So there's threats to all three of the primary scope, schedule, and budget. And I will just add one thing before I get to my point. When we did the senior center, it felt to me like schedule was the priority. We ended up with a fairly large overrun. We wanted it to be, a shining example of what Redmond can do from a scope perspective. And but schedule drove, and I think Councilmember Anderson asked this question a number of times, is schedule driving some of the budget increase? I'm not revisiting the past, I'm just providing examples. What I would like to see, and I probably will not be on council when all of this comes down, but I would like to see a risk management plan on scope, schedule, and budget as to how these drivers and factors are affecting the decision making. You almost described a design to cost earlier when you were talking about how you sort of reevaluated and reconsidered what would go into that. But we don't necessarily want to shortchange the capability and the cost efficiencies for future. We also want to make sure that, if we're going to end up going to the taxpayers and say, hey, sorry guys, we need to raise all kinds of tax revenue in order to build this MOC, we want to be clear that that is an emerging likelihood as sooner rather than later. And again, I've already mentioned schedule. So as you put your risk plan together, I think it's really important that you keep in mind how these opposing dynamics of scope, schedule, and budget are being addressed and which one is your primary concern. I know that's a lot. It's a request. You don't really need to answer it tonight.
Councilmember Fields, I do appreciate those comments, and I do want to address just a couple points on that. Fortunately, we have employees who need a functional workspace. They're just happy right now that we're seriously talking about this and heading down a road to get this project going. We don't have the pressures of a constituency that, for example, that you had at the community center that needed a functional space right away. So schedule is not driving this for us. When we talk about scope, for me, that is probably one of the bigger drivers because we are looking to create a functional workspace for multi-generations. The budget is another driver because this is big money and it's real money that we are making this generational investment here in Redmond to provide these services over a period of time that obviously we will not be around to benefit from it. We have been having discussions with finance. Right now, in the CIP, we have $150 million hard committed over the 6-year period that we will have for this project. Add in design, money, $7.5 million, and then what we are proposing in this year's CIP is another set aside of another $10 million. So for hard construction costs, or hard costs, hard dollars, we have identified $160 million. Now, depending on where we come out on the design process and what we come up with, obviously, we're going to have a delta that we have to make up. But in doing our analysis and the capacity that the city has to issue debt, and then what that payback period would be over a 30-year time period, based on our initial analysis that we would be able to support the payback of that delta without raising utility rates or other taxes beyond what we anticipate right now of just general increases over that 30-year time period. We can come back and have a further discussion in terms of anticipatory, or what we're anticipating would be the financing needs. But our initial calculations is that that delta is something that's more than manageable for us to be funded on a yearly basis out of our regular CIP program without a major detriment to our other capital needs. So lots more to talk about on that component, for sure.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that response. And it's, I guess my concern or understanding was that timing or schedule was a critical factor. I'm sure that if I would have measured my blood pressure after your question, it would have been down because I knew my concern was, in fact, that schedule was going to become a critical factor, and that would make scope and budget that much more difficult to attain. So I appreciate that information, and I appreciate your acknowledgement and understanding of the position that the city is in here. So thank you.
You bet. And if we just, to build off of that, if we hit our timelines that we're anticipating, getting somebody on board, sometime in the second quarter, getting that the designer and the contractor on board. I mean, you're looking at 18 to 24 months probably for full design, and we can't forget the permitting process as well. So that's kind of, what we would be looking at, that at the earliest, we would go to hard construction sometime in probably mid-27 is when we would start the construction process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Nueva Camina.
Thank you. Director Burke, you must have been reading my mind, because as soon as you talked about the 4.5% inflation, I was bringing out a CPI calculator, and I'm doing the math on it, and then you went right to it, so I appreciate that. Wanted to get some clarity on the progressive design build, because I also heard that we're looking at conservative numbers at the $169 million. Did we go conservative on those numbers because of the progressive design build, and that we don't have to plan for as large of a delta between what actuals versus projected are?
I hate to admit this, but we took a hard look at those numbers, because when we had our pie in the sky process, we were looking at $350 million. So these numbers that, Scott and his team really helped us take a finite look at, right, of really what is realistic and then what is going into these numbers to build. That allowed us to really roll that back and give us kind of basically, I would say, a 30 to 40% buffer kind of in these numbers. And the benefit as we look at this is, as you get into the design, in terms of, we set the parameters of really what kind of facility that we're looking for, right? We have the general guidelines, but, we need to hit lead to a certain level, right? And it needs to be open and functional and the whole deal. That allows us to further kind of refine those conservative numbers. And I'm anticipating, knock on wood, even lower than kind of what we're looking at to put us in a better swing.
And my question was really looking at why such conservative numbers, because this way, we can plan. I love the alternative instead of, looking at raising taxes, understanding we've got a solid credit rating. We can responsibly take on some debt. We're looking at 100-year lifetime of the new MOC. 30 years is totally reasonable. Understanding how we can do that, I'm totally on board with that, and just making sure that we're not going too conservative on the 169.
Sure. No, that's an excellent point. And I want to say we learned a hard lesson on the community center project. Councilmember Fields alluded to it. Schedule drove a lot of things, and we hit a perfect storm of the pandemic. Costs ballooned. There was a lack of understanding in terms of how COVID changed the supply chain management, how those costs grew exponentially. And we did not factor those costs into the initial dollar amount that we came to the council for, right? And we had to come back a couple times for additional money as these costs were being realized. As we went down the road. So what we wanted to do was make an approach where we understand growth, we understand things change, but we don't want to have to come back to the council midway through the project and say, oops, we're short $70 million, right? So we went into it with a different focus in terms of how we were going to develop our rough order of magnitude dollars. Scott, I don't know if you want to add anything on to that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to add a few thoughts to that. So when Director Burt says conservative, the way that we approach the initial cost modeling on this project, we're obviously very early on in the process. So we're looking at unit costs, building square footage costs. We're looking at, as you're aware, there's different types of structures on this site. So enclosed vehicle storage that requires conditioning, but maybe not to the level of, continuous human occupancy. There's covered storage that does not have to be conditioned. So there's a variety of structure types on the site. We're not using a similar square footage unit cost for each of those. Working with Stantec, who is our partner that is really an expert in these types of facilities, has done a number of them, many of them around the country, and our cost modeler, to begin to identify cost based on similar facilities where we know that there's a range for different building types in this project type. And not just picking the lowest because we want the initial number to look the best, not picking the highest because, it wouldn't, there were reasons why the higher end of the range were at that level. They might have been requiring a higher degree of sustainability, or they might have anticipated much larger future growth projections than we're looking at here. But we've taken kind of what we would feel is a very responsible mid-range number. We've included the appropriate levels of design and estimating contingency for being this early in the process. That gives us all a degree of comfort that as the project develops, that contingency can cover the advanced design of the project as it matures. And so when Director Burt says conservative, I think what we're trying to convey, or what we've tried to convey, is that they're comfortable numbers. We truly believe that as the project develops, we or another consultant team, design build team, can improve upon those numbers and bring back happy news, if you will, instead of a request that, oops, we underestimated it at the beginning, and now there's additional money that needs to be requested.
I'm very excited for MOC, for the staff to have, as Councilmember Stewart said, an absolutely great place to live or to work, just as the rest of our city staff does.
And Maybe if you don't mind, if I could add a couple more points to that. So this industry, Public Works, is not the only industry that's suffering, if you will, from an aging workplace, a trained workforce. And so as folks begin to age and retire out of this industry, you need to be able to attract and retain talented workers to come back and fill their place. And one way to do that is to provide facilities that are humane, that are dignified, that are filled with natural light, that are great places to work. And as Director Burt said at the beginning, the folks out there are doing an amazing job working in the facilities that they currently have, but they don't quite meet that standard that we're striving towards here. The other point that I wanted to make with the options, there was initially some thought that retaining some of the existing assets that were not to the end of their useful life might have a financial benefit to the city. So we studied that at great length. That was part of the 3 options that you saw. When we looked at what would be required to bring those facilities up to current seismic structural codes, electrical, MEP, energy codes, the cost to do that, when you compared that to the cost of a more efficient new structure, was actually more. So it became apparent to all of us pretty quickly after doing that study that the decant facility, which is kind of the highest value existing asset on the site, was the one that made sense to keep. Because by demolishing and replacing Trinity and Parks, the footprint of those facilities really created some awkward site circulation and impediments to an efficient site layout. So given that replacement and renovation were about equal, it seemed worthwhile to consider and really recommend in the preliminary preferred option to demolish those and build a new facility that would actually enhance and improve site circulation, site safety for all the people that are on the site, which is 200+ people.
Thank you so much. Other questions? Councilmember Salahuddin.
Not a question, just appreciation for this plan. I had a chance we had a chance to visit the MOC earlier this year, and this is much needed, so thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing other questions, I'll hop in with mine. Just in terms of decisions from the council, so you mentioned that there, and I think it was in your, in one of the graphics, like May 2025 contract award decision. In terms of what you're hoping to get tonight, I mean, it sounds like you're sharing with us that there were these 3 options, but you're moving forward with option 3. Were you seeking our tacit approval or direct approval of that to move forward, or?
No, what we wanted to do on this one was present you the process that we've gone through to make this very informed decision to pursue this, this contracting method, and then also just to let you know in terms of kind of tentative form and structure of what we anticipate the MOC to look like as we move forward into the design process.
Great. And can you clarify, so is the actual next formal decision for the council going to be in May 2025, or is there a step earlier where you're going to be seeking any specific direction from us?
The only potential, it would be once we select the owner's representative process, depending on what we bring that initial contract in on, that would be a touch point. But then the next big touch point and council approval would be when we bring the contract forward for the design bid build team.
Great. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing a ton of people objecting to what's been presented tonight, so I guess if there were, you would have gotten that feedback. And so thank you very much for coming to bring this to us. I did have 2 quick questions. One is, you mentioned a little bit about some of the green building potential options. In terms of what's been scoped in this, the current kind of conservative estimate, what level of green building type of construction is included in this estimate?
So I think the cost that we're using was for silver for the main building, was it, or gold?
I believe it was gold, and I might phone a friend if I could.
Yeah, we
I've
have
got
Claire
Claire
online.
Renhack
Yeah.
online from the East Coast. Claire, lead gold is the target?
Hey Scott, yes, I think LEED Golden is in compliance with the city's 2050 vision.
Yep.
Great, thank you. Just wanted to check before I misspoke. I will say that one of the things that we're very interested in continuing to explore, and again, there's another technical memo that will be part of the overall master plan deliverable on this, is just sustainable building strategies. And we are very aware of Redmond's aspirational goals along those lines. So those types of strategies are things that we as a firm are very versed in, are very interested in making this as sustainable a project as possible within the context of the project. So we will continue to bring those kind of ideas and options to the table. We do have some preliminary support from the City of Redmond staff that's working on those policies. So again, as this project develops, these are things that we'll continue to turn over more rocks and continue to explore.
So will you, as part of that, will you be bringing us back as it is developing any like potential decisions on additional, choices there of to say if we wanted to add these features, it might add X amount of budget?
I definitely think so. More so if we are getting to that point where we feel that those choices are going to take us out beyond that comfortable budget realm that we want to operate within. What we anticipate is, as we get into the design process, probably once we get close to probably about 90%, I would say, we will have a really good idea on more of a finalized cost package, what we're going to need to fully fund it. And so that would be another touch point. And, as we go through the design process as well, as we uncover some of these things, it's definitely, if we're identified early on, like, okay, what would be the delta to take us from gold to platinum, right? Okay, well, that's going to be another $15 million, right? Or whatever. That I would see, council member, as something that we would come back and gain the guidance from council to say, are you comfortable with us seeking an additional budget for this to make this decision to go to this level?
Great, thank you. And I guess for my 2 cents is I definitely would be interested in looking at that just as part of our overall sustainability goals and modeling, kind of walking the walk of what we're hoping we'll see all around our city, but starting especially to be able to achieve our municipal carbon neutrality goals as well as some of our other goals, also around construction and demolition. Using some of those best practices. So being able to model for others that we do it best, but also
Absolutely.
recognizing that we do need to contain costs on this project, which is probably one of our most expensive. Last quick question on this. You mentioned about bonding, and I might have missed what percentage you would estimate we might bond for this project for the cost.
It could be anywhere from $55 to $80 million. It really depends on what we come back with.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Great. Well, I don't have any other questions. Are there other questions from the council? All right, seeing none. Thank you so much for the update. Thank you so much for coming to speak with us and for your work on this.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Enjoyed being here tonight.
We appreciate the support.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Keep up the great work. All right, that brings us to our last item on the agenda, which is council talk time. One of the items on this agenda is a proposed hopper item from Councilmember Salahuddin, so I'll turn it over to him to kick us off.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. And I'll try to keep it brief because I know Councilmember Anderson also has a hopper item as well. So UFC W3000 reached out to me and I put together this hopper item very quickly because of the deadline in getting it to Deidre and getting it on the agenda. So essentially in October of 2022, as the problem statement lays out, Kroger and Albertsons announced an intention to merge. I realize there's some words missing in my haste to put this together, but What this Hopper item is seeking is Redmond to pass a resolution, adopt a resolution to express an official position in opposition to this merger and sending a copy to the Federal Trade Commission, asking them to oppose the merger. This impacts specifically businesses, workers in grocery stores across the city. I did lay out four, again, in my haste. One of them is actually in Redmond Ridge. And so there's two QFCs and one Safeway that are in the Redmond area that would be on the list of stores that would be sold to a wholesaler as an intended part of the merger. I just wanted to lay out some statistics that aren't necessarily in the resolution itself, but Washington has 124 stores that would be sold to a grocer that currently only operates 24 grocery stores and only one pharmacy. The next highest states with stores being sold are Arizona with 101, Colorado with 91, and then California with 63. So Washington is bearing a huge portion of stores that would be sold to a wholesale grocer. And then more than half of all supermarkets in Washington are currently owned by either Kroger or Albertsons and account for 50% of all supermarket sales in the state, which goes even further into a potential show of solidarity for the workers and even the grocery prices that would be impacted by a potential merger. So the ask is, I guess, assuming at the September 3rd meeting, if we could adopt a resolution in advance of the September 16th trial in Washington State.
Comments, questions from the council? Thoughts on this? Councilmember Stewart?
Thanks so much. Appreciate you bringing this back. This is actually an issue area that former Councilmember Carson had taken a lead on in our council previously. And I think maybe something that if this council were to weigh in on through a resolution, for me, it would be important to elevate the impact to our residents. The language that we're looking at here lays out toward the top the impact to individual companies, and really I believe, as Councilmember Carson used to say, it would really be the residents who would be impacted negatively through this. So those are just my thoughts. Thanks.
Appreciate that. And I will call out specifically in the resolution, the last two whereas clauses really do highlight the focus and impact on residents. There would need to be an amendment to the 3 QFCs to 2 within the city, but hopefully if there are additional focuses on residents, absolutely would love to add those in.
Other comments? Councilmember Anderson?
What was the ask date for adoption?
September 3rd.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Nueva Camina?
Thank you. I'm just wanting to make sure, just to communicate that I am in support of this. Councilmember Salahuddin and I had a very brief conversation earlier, raising Councilmember Stewart's and Councilmember Carson's previous concerns about this, is that this would mean most of our grocery stores are now gone, and having a considerable impact to the residents, to our community, and it would just well, it would just be terrible, just plainly put. So I'm very much in support of this and happy to sign off on it.
Thank you. Are there other comments from council members? Okay, I'll weigh in. I think, I'm happy, as I said, actually, when it was brought up previously, because I do think it will impact our residents and access to food in our community, especially in kind of our walkable urban centers, like our downtown area. I used to walk to one of those QFCs from my apartment all the time. I think, it is critical. I like the idea of maybe adding one additional whereas to just emphasize that. So maybe, since Councilmember Stewart brought it up, I would suggest that the two of you could work on an additional piece of language to emphasize that. And then I guess my other suggestion would be, I would love to have staff and/or legal as is necessary. Maybe we go to staff first, and if they think legal should review, take a look at this, just to make sure that we're not implying anything that would have any like legal concerns or something like that. I don't think there's a lot in here, but just in case, to have staff take a look, and if there's anything else that they would add as in terms of the impacts or data that we might want to add to strengthen it. Go ahead, Councilmember Salahuddin.
And if I could add, I did, when I sent it very, very quickly last week, I sent it to COO Files, and hopefully staff will get a chance to review. I'll also work with Councilmember Stewart on that language, and just making sure that the, that date, timeline, September 3rd, hopefully it works, and we can make sure that it's ahead of that September 16th date that was asked by UFCW 3000.
Okay, great. Is there objection? Oh, Councilmember Stewart, go ahead.
I just want to be very clear because I'm a little bit sensitive to taking on an action with the inspiration as it's written in the Hopper form about a particular organization. For me, the motivation for expressing a position on this is the impact to our residents. So I would love staff to weigh in on, or legal review if needed. And thank you so much, Councilmember Salahuddin, because I actually called COO Files today just to double check that we wouldn't be interfering with any work that staff were already taking on to weigh in on behalf of the city. And the answer was no, not particularly, as this issue's kind of creeped along for a little while. Thanks.
Great. So what I'm hearing from the last comment and all the comments, I'll summarize here and see if anyone has any objection, is that maybe in terms of the memo that would come out, that we'd make it clear that this is about the Redmond City Council taking a position and sending our opposition in solidarity with our residents as well as workers and others who would care about this issue. So maybe I know, I think probably the next step would be the staff the next step would be maybe for the two of you to work on that extra line, then for Councilmember Salahuddin, and if you want, you could copy me in as the third council member to then be with staff to get a review, and then hopefully the staff could assist in drafting a memo, which would make that the intent of passing this resolution clear in advance of September 3rd. And we'll check in to make sure that date works, but hopefully we can get that on the agenda.
Yeah, that timeline sounds great. And just as an added note, in another tie to the city of Kenmore, they also passed a resolution on this as well. So we have precedents within our own state of another jurisdiction doing something similar.
Great, thank you so much. And I forgot to mention that Council Vice President Forsyth did write to me to say that she was in support of moving forward with this as well. So I'm counting that a majority are in support of us moving forward with a vote on this. Does anyone have any other comments on this and next steps? Okay. Seeing none, thank you so much for bringing that forward. Appreciate it. And yeah, I know we'll all be watching this situation. And I believe that we all received an email from Councilmember Anderson. We didn't have the Hopper form due to, I believe, some technical issues. But happy to have you share tonight. Thanks.
Sure. Thank you. So tonight I have a simple proposal to ask for your support to advance this item and plant more equity into our city policies for this section of the budget. I'm happy to come back with a markup of the fiscal policy for the next session, hopefully ahead of our salary schedule setting. But just to read this out loud for folks, the proposal is to add 2 new lines to the fiscal policy, item 1E, and a bullet in 2B as follows. Under general financial goals, which is the first section in the fiscal policy, a new item 1E of currently 4, there would be a 5th one added that says, to create a workplace where all employees feel valued and are compensated fairly and equitably for their contributions. And the second line to add is a new bullet under operating budget policies, item 2B, goals for the budget process. For reference, you can find the fiscal policy document at the back of our budget. And that item is goals for the budget process to ensure pay equity across all departments. The problem statement associated with this is that council does not have an adopted policy position or statement of intent regarding pay equity in the fiscal policy of the budget, a great place for it to be located, and compensation and benefits should be acknowledged as a key expenditure in the city's budget documents and fiscal policy. This aligns with pretty much all of our goals, as budget is one of our major responsibilities, but specifically our DEI goal and our strategic and responsive area. I want to say thanks to Councilmember Fields for being co-sponsor, and happy to accept other co-sponsors as well. And then I think the other item was I'd be happy to come back with the markup for next time. And if there's questions on that, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments from the council? Councilmember Stewart?
I'm sorry, I do feel it's a little bit unfair to consider this item. I think others have tried to have wanted to bring things when hopper items couldn't be complete. So that we're considering this is, I feel is a little bit unfair to those who have wanted to in the past. But since we are considering it, I will say that happy to as the council member said, see a markup or continue to look at this. My substantive feedback on the proposed item 1E is feeling, is the verb there. Employees feel valued, and maybe that's a really hard thing to measure and to judge. And so maybe that could be, a different verb could be used there to make it something more enforceable. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And I will speak to the process. I do think, to be fair, which already Councilmember Anderson offered to do, would be to come back with the proposal more drafted out. Hopefully we can get you access to that official hopper form. I know there's some technical issues, so that at the next talk time, we could review this again. I actually was going to ask Director Cochran, I think I see her still online, hopefully she's still there, if we'll have a time upcoming where we're actually going to be reviewing the fiscal policy.
Yes, we can make time for that in September as well as October. You'll be able to see what we are proposing right about the time that you'll be getting the budget. It'll be fresh in your mind as you take your first review. I'm happy to add any discussion at that time.
Great. And perhaps if you wanted to distribute the current fiscal policies to the council in advance, people can take a look at that. Councilmember Anderson, did you have a comment on that?
It'd be great if I could get this on the FAC agenda for September, Mr. Fields, as he said to me when we were talking about it.
Wait, I'm sorry. This is Councilmember Fields. I missed something.
Can we put this on the FAC agenda for a follow-up?
Oh, right.
That was the request
yes.
for the documents and stuff like that.
Thank you, Councilmember Anderson. I think we skipped a step here in that we do need to have the council agree if they would like to see it on the FAC agenda, or potentially what I might propose would be that we have a FAC agenda item on the fiscal policies, and we could just overall look at those in advance of the budget process. Councilmember Stewart, did you have a comment?
It was the same. Thank you.
Are people good with just having a FAC item on our fiscal policies? And Director Cochran, are you planning to bring any other potential changes to the fiscal policies?
At this time, no. The only one that is currently being drafted is, well, yes, I am. That was incorrect. But it won't be a surprise. It is all related to the implementation of the credit card processing fees and policies to support that.
Okay, great. So I would propose, since the goal of this is to have it done by the budget process, would be for us to have just an overall conversation on the fiscal policies at an upcoming FAC meeting, when also that other addition is ready, so we can kind of talk comprehensively about it. Would you be amenable to that, Councilmember Anderson?
Sure. I promise that while we have our time off, I will clean up the form and make sure you have it. But the one comment, it didn't put a timing on here. This also was relevant based on our conversation earlier today for salary commission. It would be great to have this particular item and our goal and philosophy adopted prior to the salary commission appointment so that they have guidance from us on how to think about compensation and benefits. That's in our interest. Thank you.
I apologize for interrupting, but I just wanted to mention that another place that you may want to add this direction is in the long-range financial strategy. That is something that we had discussed at FAC in either February or March, and you should have that document in your email, and that really does set a lot of the direction on how we budget for salaries and benefits, and you may find it useful to add some guidance there.
Great, thank you. And I think in advance of the budget process, we typically like to look at that strategy as well, so that makes a lot of sense. Councilmember Fields?
Well, similar to what Director Cochran just said, and my recollection is every budget cycle we look at our financial policies, and I don't remember them necessarily being at committee of the whole meetings, but the question in the past has been, are there any council proposed changes or acceptance or edits to our financial policies? So I think this isn't just a discussion, it's a decision-making mechanism that is part of the budget process, and this fits in there. So I don't know that we can have a discussion in fact, but at some point it needs to be in a business meeting, whether it's consent agenda or a staff item. I'm not sure what the timing is. I would also agree with Councilmember Anderson that this has an influence or should have an influence on a major action that we're taking in appointing a salary commission and setting salaries both for council and the mayor. So I think time is essential, and I think that the process is there. We just have to understand it and find the right timing and the right business meeting, or the right decision-making meeting, I should say. So
the discussion that we had at FAC earlier this year was the documents, both the long-range financial strategy and fiscal policies were sent with the understanding that the finance department would be working through our edits to the document during this budget process update. And we will present those to you as part of the preliminary budget. If there's anything that feels critical, it would be discussed as part of the forecast. But then understanding that there is openness to any edits that council has. And so I am more than willing to take in those edits and bring them forward as part of that review process. So to any and all council members, if you have edits, please let me know and I will send you those documents.
Great. So it sounds like actually this will likely just come forward with part of the budget process. So, and I guess to get to the issue around the salary commission, I think I'm not sure, we don't know if we have Director Laird here anymore, but perhaps just in terms of conveying the council's general interest in pay equity, that might just be something that could be conveyed to the salary commission as like that's something that the city values as one of our values is equity. Since I think the timing may not quite align, but the understanding that that's important across the boards in our city is obviously critical. For me, I'm happy to wait till the budget process to look at this. So. I'm seeing general nods. So I guess it sounds like we'll have this come forward, and Councilmember Anderson can definitely send some suggested language to Director Cochran, and we'll see both of those policies come forward as part of the budget process that we can have a discussion on during one of the budget nights. And Councilmember Anderson, if you'd like to formalize and draft your proposal so that it can be posted whenever we are revisiting this, then we can have it documented especially for transparency for the public, which is the goal in general of these hopper items. So that way, not only can council members read them in advance, but the public can read what it is that we're proposing in advance. So I think that'd be great. Thank you. All right. Thanks, everyone. And thank you, council members, for bringing up your ideas. Before we close out on council talk time, I will note a few things. One is that I sent you all an email earlier this week letting you know that we have scheduled our first conversations with council, which is going to be a quarterly series where we'll actually be noticing it as a special meeting where we'll have hopefully all of the council there, or as many as can make it, but the goal would be to have the whole council available to be able to reach out to the public in a different way than a council meeting. So the first conversations with council will be a roundtables discussion setting in downtown Park on Monday, September 30th from 5 to 7 p.m. Which I looked it up, and sunset is at 7:10 that day. So we should get in there while it's still fairly light out, which will be good. And so working with Deidre and Derek Wing to be able to plan that. Just wanted to ask everyone, Deidre did send out a calendar invite for that. If you can make sure to accept that if you're going to be able to make it. My hope is that everyone can make it so we can reach out to our public as a council. And as I said, we will notice that as a special meeting in the park. And one question I did want to ask the council for that, we had discussed in the past potentially doing like a theme for multiple different tables. My thought is that we'd have 1 to 2 council members at maybe up to like 5 round tables where people could sit, maybe have like a 10 top type of thing where people could sit and talk with each other and with the council member. We had talked about maybe having like a housing table or a environment table, but we alternatively could just have council members at tables and people can ask you whatever it is you like or they like. So wanted to just get a piece of feedback on whether people would prefer to have theme tables where we all sit and then maybe at some point we say switch, or whether we just all each take a table and then sit and talk with people about the issues on their minds. Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. And first of all, I just want to thank council leadership. I am so excited. We're going to have a council gathering in the park and an opportunity for folks to come and chat with the council in an environment that is outside of the halls of this building. So I am so excited. I'm a huge fan of the open space technology, meaning I think it would be great to have tables with topics and folks can come and go, especially since we're in the park. Maybe they can be there for 10 minutes, maybe they can be there the whole hour, but they could stop by and visit whichever tables. It'd be helpful too to know, like, if one council member has the housing table, okay, maybe then they've already got their laptop out with 2 or 3 of the major plans related to housing pulled up. That's helpful to me in my office hours to be able to show the public, oh, this is where we're working on this, or this is where your ideas. I do a lot of wayfinding in my office hours, and I kind of envision a little bit of that happening here too. So that's my vote for something more, topics per table that folks can pick and choose and have the conversations they're most interested in. Thanks.
Other opinions on that? Councilmember Nueva Camina.
Thank you. I love that idea and having the topics. And of course, if there's, something that public wanted to discuss with a particular council member, then they would still have that option to do that as well. So not that you can only talk about the topics at the table, but that the majority of the conversations would be about whatever topic is at that particular table. And then whatever they might want to speak with Councilmember Stewart on, or Councilmember Salahuddin, or any of us too.
That sounds great. Wonderful. So I'm hearing topics at tables. What I can do is come up with, go ahead, Councilmember Salahuddin.
Yeah, just one note, in us potentially having 5 tables, if we do pick those 5 topics, that sort of indicates that those are the 5 big issues that we're focused on, and they might be in order priority of, our focus, what we've seen in the survey and so forth, but not to minimize whatever else folks might bring, maybe just a mixed table of talk about anything, because I want to make sure that we're not excluding any issues that are important to others.
That's great. We could use our strategic priorities from our community strategic plan and maybe have one of the tables be like MISC or something like that, so that way, or ask me anything type of thing. It's an AMA table. That could be fun. So yeah, it sounds good. So I will, I'll write back to to confirm with you all what the potential topics are, and at our next study session, bring this up as another fun council talk time to confirm on the planning for that. But looking forward to getting out and talking with our public. The second conversations with council, we're already going to get planning on for January, and Deidre did send all of council a survey for dates to find out what dates might work best for you in January. The goal of that one is to have a different format, since I think with these conversations is to have different types of formats that'll work for different people depending on their preference to reach out to us. That one will be the town hall style format at the Redmond Senior and Community Center, where we can kind of be up on the stage, people can ask us questions, and we can do that interface back and forth. So please, if you can, fill out your preferred dates so we can get that locked in and just get the advertising right away. My goal would be that by January, then we're planning for the next one. So that way we just keep kind of the momentum going, and we can find different spots to have these out in our community throughout the year. And we just get a great cadence going where everyone knows that quarterly they're always going to have this access to their council members in different ways. So that's the goal. One of the other pieces is, I know many of you may have seen in the internal email that's sent around, the council connections piece that goes out to staff every week, that gives like a little update on what happens with the council. And Council Vice President Forsyth and I have been talking with Deidre about how to kind of add a little more content in there about what the council's up to. And one idea that we had was, if council members are out in community doing things, going to events, the types of things that we share out often at, our ombuds report, to be able to share photos with Deidre that could be shared out in that, so that our staff know what we're up to and how we're engaging with community. So just wanted to put that out as an option/request for everyone, that if you'd like to be featured in Council Connections, which again is which is the kind of section of our internal newsletter that goes up to staff every week, to let them know about key things happening in the city. And there's a little council piece that to let us know if you have any updates over time. We're going to be working to improve that. And then last thing that I wanted to note, let me make sure I didn't miss anything on my notes here. Hold on one second. I have two more. One is that the Downtown Redmond Art Walk is going to be happening on September 19th from 4 to 7 p.m. And you all should have signups for that as well, to sign up for a 1-hour shift. It's pretty fun. I last year had a great time going tabling and then going and checking out all the art. So please sign up for that ASAP, so that way we can plan for it. Also note that Rockin' on the River for the whole public is this Wednesday, August 21st, or this Wednesday, and then again on August 21st, both of those days from 6 to 8 p.m. So come join us at the City Hall campus and some great music that we'll have here. And then lastly, I will just note that, I'm going to find my note here. That following up on our conversation from the previous weeks around ombuds and that ombuds form, I am working on updates with Deidre to be able to add in some more of the council feedback on how to improve that form. And I'll be bringing it to the next study session talk time for additional discussion, just with the feedback included. And if anything has come to mind for you all on ombuds, then feel free to send in those comments, because we'll be working on it, Deidre and I, over the next couple weeks, and Council Vice President Forsyth as well, to bring that draft back. So I just wanted to throw that out there, if after that conversation you had more thoughts on how we can clarify our process and expectations for that. And then lastly, for the listening public, council will be on recess for the next 2 weeks. So council, enjoy the recess, and community, we will be back on September 3rd for our business meeting. Councilmember Stewart.
Sorry, I had one thing I wanted to share with the public. The Department of Commerce is now accepting applications. They take about 30 seconds to complete for middle and low-income households in our community and across the state of Washington. One-time $200 bill credits are now available for electrical utility customers, and you can learn more by going to wacleanenergycredits.com. Again, that's WA like Washington, wacleanenergycredits.com. And if you scroll down on the left side, there's a little click here for more information, and you can very quickly look at the income charts that are suggested there, and then take 30 seconds and apply for the $200 credit for your electrical bill, again, for low and middle income families, and it is funded by the Climate Commitment Act. So these funds are available until September 15th. So spread the word and apply if that is a good resource for you. Thanks.
Wonderful, thank you. Are there any other comments? I guess I wrapped up a little too fast there. No? Okay, seeing no other items, this meeting is adjourned.